Comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, 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 money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar. Ching, ching, bling, bling. Cut the chatter. You ain't talking money, then you're talking no matter. Bonus track.
That will cost you extra. See you later, sucker.
You know, the guy in the booth who's talking to you on a tiny little earphone, he's afraid the guys at network are going to tell him it's through if he lets the guy keep talking like I'm talking to you. Because the corporation's got the networks and they get to say who gets to talk about the country and who's crazy today. I would cut to a commercial if you still want this job. Because you may not be back tomorrow with this corporate mob. Cut to a commercial.
Okay, flush him.
Cut the commercial. Cut the commercial. Cut the commercial. Cut the commercial. Okay.
What do you do to relax? By the way, you seem a little tense.
Drugs. No, that's not true.
That was only a joke, wasn't it? Tell the folks it was just a joke.
that was.
It was just a joke.
That was just a joke.
Yeah.
How would you describe yourself?
There's nothing. There's no self.
And how would you like to be remembered?
Doesn't matter.
What were your dreams as a child?
Nightmares.
Hello and welcome back to Overlapping Dialogue for your second annual Harry Dean Awards. It feels weird to be coming back to Overlapping Dialogue.
Yep.
We've been immersed, of course, in our Mad Men podcast, Blowing Smoke.
You are Kyle. I am Levi, by the way.
Oh, that's right.
We got to say, because we didn't do an official intro.
That's
but,
right.
Yeah.
So I'm Kyle. That's Levi.
But yeah, we're knee deep in cigarettes and spilt liquor that all came just from oh gosh, what's his name? The guy on Mad Men that's
Freddie Rumsen.
Freddie Rumsen. Of course, the guy with the liquor in his name. So yeah, we've been busy with that, been enjoying that, but I'm glad to be back.
I know,
about
it feels
movies,
like a retro, almost retro, like we're going back into the old school ways, you know. And this is only our second annual Harry Dean. I always want to say, as we talked about last time, it's the Harry Dean Awards, of course, named after a legendary character actor,
legend, stone cold.
I mean,
legend.
he is Harry Dean Stanton.
This is also the first time we've done this since David Lynch has passed away. Also, and we talked about that on a couple episodes ago on our Blowing Smoke podcast, so go look for that. But yeah, so
he had died very early this year. Of course, he's very much in our hearts and thoughts. And again, feel free to go back and listen to our Fire Walk with Me episode commentary. Of course, we did on. We talked a lot about David Lynch, of course, in that. So, Levi, 2024 in film. Here we are, obviously. And we're recording this just to come out right before the Academy Awards ceremony this year. We can talk a little bit later, maybe towards the end, about the whole Oscar narratives this year, as there always are. I guess before we get into each of these categories, and as far as loyal fans, we did certain categories last year. Some we dropped. Most of them we kept, and we've added a few. Just to show you how much I think Kismet's involved in all this. I added up exactly how many awards we're going to go through here. Exactly 23, and funny enough, wouldn't you know it, Levi?
That's movie 43 minus 20. Right. I'm just saying.
There are exactly 23 Oscar nominations this year, so certainly some of them line up and are close to real ones that exist. Other ones are very much... And don't worry, One Love fans, we do have a special award waiting for you. No spoilers, of course, but we'll see what that is.
It's honestly kind of a spoiler that you did mention.
Well, I didn't say for what award.
Right.
So just wait and you'll find out.
Because you're already like, it's a real, to go back to Blowing Smoke, it's a real One Love. Who do you think thought of that? What the hell is that? Like, I mean, a lot of y'all are like, what even is One Love? Like, yeah.
All right, Levi.
Anyway.
2024 in film, like general thoughts, impressions, big picture stuff. Now, we actually covered most of the year in film as it was
we got
happening.
pretty close.
With
So we're going to
Black
hit
and
up
Dialogue.
some movies that we didn't talk about officially. I think the biggest one of those is The Brutalist, and we'll probably spend quite a bit of time on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I mean, I was saying this earlier in the year. I was very impressed by this year overall. Movies that we're not even going to get to talk about. Some of them I really like we're not even going to mention Furiosa. That's a movie I really liked quite a bit at the time and thought was really good. I mean, not as good as Fury Road, and I won't say it's forgettable, but it's kind of passed back out of the conversation a little bit. But movies like that were really good, that it's like, yeah, we just didn't really have the time to talk about it or whatever. I mean, we did when it came out. Obviously, we talked about it.
Specifically with that one, I mean, I liked the movie. I think how quickly Fury Road as a film has already ascended into the like action film canon as this hallowed text. The fact that it's just not that, and that a modern Mad Max movie like Fury Road kind of just is the full-on, full-fledged text of what it can be. Obviously, Furiosa does some things a little differently, and I do think it is quite good. But I think, if anything, that just speaks to how quickly Fury Road has ascended to being this hallowed text in modern film canon, and that Furiosa feels like it's kind of coasting off of that nearly 10 years later too.
Because every Mad Max movie has felt different than the other pretty definitively, and that feels just kind of like Fury Road again in a lot of ways. It's not as different. Now, that's just to say, the only reason I really brought that up was that was not on my top 10, and I still quite like that movie.
Yeah, I've made a top 10. I have not made a top 10, and it wouldn't make mine, but I liked it.
Yeah, it was towards the bottom, but no, it's off of it now. So I'm pretty sure. Let me check actually, but I'm pretty sure it got knocked down.
But you were singing the praises of this year in general as it was happening. I'm someone who overall still thinks
it's not on my top 10.
I'll prefer 2023 just a little bit, mostly because as it's kind of an ongoing debate between Levi and I. And I don't think there's really a right or wrong way really to view this, because, in the end, it all shakes out to where, for the most part, we have quality years, I feel like, for the most part. But I place a lot of emphasis more so personally on the maybe handful or so of movies towards the top. Levi's a little more, which I think makes a lot of sense too, of like the overall quality across the board. And this was a year I was slightly down on compared to 2023, but then literally just going through and making all these categories and talking about what goes where, it made me stop and go, wow, this is actually a pretty good, solid collection of things that came out this year. So it made me feel even better about it. That it did.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No.
I was just going to say before. Well, yeah, to speak on that briefly, I mean, I'm much more of a quantity person. Quantity and quality. That's what I feel like I'm a pretty easy person to please, actually, about movies. I've always found that to be true. Mainly for one reason. You don't know why that is?
Why is that?
Because I only watch movies I know that I'm probably going to like.
Right.
I mean,
we're not professional critics where we're obligated to go see things.
So there's movies I'm like, no, I'm not going to see that, or no, I don't think that looks good, or even movies like, I didn't see it, but Speak No Evil or whatever it was. That I was like, I kind of like to see that. It looks fun, but I know what that is going in. Like, it's very easy to be like, okay, But no, I feel like this year, like, for example, just to go through it real quick and then we'll move on. Last year of the year before, 2023, Beau is Afraid, Past Lives, The Holdovers, Oppenheimer, Poor Things. Those are all like really high quality top five.
Yeah.
And then there's a really, for me, strict drop off between Poor Things and Godland, for example. And then Asteroid City, The Delink. Now, I know that was your favorite of that year, I think, and you really loved
Beau's Afraid was, but it was probably Beau's
City,
Afraid, Asteroid City, and Oppenheimer were, for me, the top three.
And then The Delinquents, Cocaine Bear, Mission Impossible. Like, the fact that that Mission Impossible movie, which you're even more down on than me, the fact that made my top 10 of that year is not good in my mind as a look.
Sure, yeah.
So for me, I mean, this year, and we're going to talk about all these movies, so I'm not going to go through them. But like, literally, the number 10 is like a 4.5-star movie. So like, and there's one on there that's only 4, and we're going to talk about that later. But like,
but
every
my
one of
top
those
10 would
is-
not be exactly the same as your top 10. There would be a lot of movies that are on both. But like, just looking at your list, what your top 10 movie is far better than last year's 10th movie. So that in its own way actually probably
and
is
that's
a reflection.
my opinion.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't mean anything. And I know I value your opinion, you value my opinion, but that shouldn't matter to you either about what my list is. But I think we're usually
close.
pretty simpatico on what we think, and the fact that was the case last year, and that's my top 10 did not look good. Now, granted, that like group of movies that were at the top were like really great movies.
Well,
like
so,
you're saying, and so you can speak to that real quick.
Well, so like last year, I think Beau's Afraid for me is still the film of the decade, and we'll see if anything can unseat that. For me personally, I think that still is the best movie so far.
It's the
that's
one
been
I'm
released.
most in awe of, because even though I think like Civil War is a better movie than that, probably technically it isn't in terms of its ambition.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't in terms of wow that now. Well, I will say, and we're talking about Civil War later, spoiler, but that is a movie that did leave me gobsmacked, to be sure, and I was literally like, wow, they really made a movie like this. But Beau's Afraid's another level of that. It's like, oh my gosh, how can you even do this?
So
and
just
like,
that triumvirate of that, to me, Beau's Afraid still the best film of the decade so far. Oppenheimer, to me, represents like the epitome of all the great things a studio movie can still do. Like that's like the gold standard of, if you have a great director like Christopher Nolan, you have a cast that's amazing, you have the ambition of its structure, you have what it's about. It's just like, and it feels like a big time Hollywood movie. That is like, oh, okay, so Hollywood still can do something that is in line of that. And then Asteroid City, as we, last year we named Wes Anderson as our Filmmaker of the Year. That, and we loved The French Dispatch kind of a little bit before that too.
Yeah.
But that to me was a revalidation of, okay, Wes Anderson's back. He's over the last few movies, he's back. He still is making great things.
And of course, he also still made he made all those short
right,
films for
that
Netflix,
too.
Wonderful World of Henry Sugar, and all those movies.
Those Roald Dahl adaptations.
Ratcatcher,
So
Poison,
to
and all
me,
that.
like those top three, this is my opinion. Those
Swan,
top
whatever it
three
was.
would be stronger than what my own top three for this year would be. However, I would agree that probably as you go further down the list, there's more quality per slot overall compared to last year's.
Yeah.
So to me, I sometimes like, because I think every film year, hypothetically, I'm like, I want to get at least 2 to 3 all-time favorites that I'm going to revisit regularly out of a year. You know what I mean?
I think that is a good way to look at it because of the fact that so many movies come out a year. It's like, were you really going to go back and watch all those movies all the time?
And of course,
Not
the answer is
necessarily
no of any year. Right. It doesn't matter what it is. So, like, for me, I feel like with 2023, I walked away with 3 new favorite films. And then some things that I also really liked, but are not going to be on that category. This year, again, I think I walked away with maybe, like, 2 for sure, and then some other ones that, like, I'll regularly revisit. But, again, I think Levi is right that the further down you go, I do think it is of overall higher quality than what the year before would have been.
Well, and I should say that I think neither year really lives up to 2022. And going back to that real quick.
Which we didn't do an official Harry Dean.
The Batman, White Noise, Babylon, Everything Everywhere All at Once, The Fablemans. That's just the top 5.
That's the strongest top 5 out of any 3 of these years. Well,
Memoria.
Yeah.
Avatar, The Way of Water. Tar.
I've actually liked that movie even more seeing it the second time.
And then I put Bodies, Bodies, Bodies on there. That was kind of more
That's
of like
actually a very strong list right there, too.
So just saying, and we've said this before, I think the last truly great movie year was 2017. Like, the amount of just
2019 had some
really
I mean,
big
and
every
ones, too.
year has its stuff, and we can go back and forth on this randomly. And everybody's talked about what are the great movie years, blah, blah, blah. 99, 39, 2007, 1975, 1971 is one I think about a random amount. 77 even. I know a lot of people talk about 1957. I don't know if you've ever heard much about that.
What
There's
are some of those? Off the top of my head, I couldn't think. But
Sweet Smell of Success is one. There's a lot. But anyway, while I'm finding that, then there's a lot that I haven't seen from that year too that I know that people really love. But yeah, like 12 Angry Men, The Seventh Seal, Paths of Glory, Wild Strawberries, Throne of Blood, Sweet Smell of Success, and then there's some just other random movies. Those are just the ones I've seen.
Did you say 12 Angry Men also?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was...
What were some that were on yours?
The
Bridge on the
Tarnished
River Kwai.
Angels.
Yeah.
That's a great movie, actually. It's a Douglas Sirk movie.
Bridge on the River Kwai, too.
That one, too, yeah. So, The Decision at Sundown, which is a great Western.
Yeah. So anyway, that's one. But yeah, people talk about that kind of stuff all the time.
I mean, I think we
doesn't
do
really
agree
matter,
with this,
but...
that ultimately a film year is kind of a coincidence of a confluence
Because it
of
ain't
all
Hollywood
these...
getting together to make great movies.
Yeah,
We know
Hollywood
that.
does not sit down and go,
No.
yo, 2025 is going to be our year. I mean, it's every film project is frankly a miracle that it happens, and so, like, a great movie year is kind of a collection of miracles in a roundabout way of, like, not just good movies, but great movies that happen to come out when they did.
This year we were talking about this the other day, got blamed, of 2024, got blamed on the strike that had happened in the summer of 2023, which kind of coincided with a very weird period where that was when, like, Oppenheimer and Barbie were coming out, and so, like, that was right after, that was randomly a big period of time because that was when that whole Titanic disaster happened where those people died, and there was just like a lot of stuff going on in the news at that time. That's usually how summers are randomly for some reason. And so a lot of people blamed last year's problems on that. Ultimately, there was still a lot of great movies that came out. Yeah. So, and yeah, it looks like there's going to be a lot of great ones this year, which we'll talk about a little later.
I'll say I've already seen my first 5-star movie of the year within 2 months, and then another movie I quite liked, and I'm like, okay, well, already. And that one movie, by the way, could maybe even by some metric be counted as a 2024 movie because it played at Sundance. And we would agree it's going to be in 2025, but I'm just saying
because that doesn't mean anything because it's like, well, a couple people saw it this year. It's like, well,
yeah.
I was going to say, I'll just go ahead and say it because it popped in my brain how much I hate hearing that. I'm like, well, a couple turds fell in the toilet bowl. Like, who cares? That's not an audience release. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like, whatever.
So, anyways, I'm already encouraged by what the slate of this year's movie
and we'll
is.
Get to that.
And you know, sometimes like these things just happen to coincide with the cycles of certain filmmakers in terms of like when it's time for them to have another movie out because of when the last release came out, and so it's a weird, I mean, it's all arbitrary in the end. I mean, you know, and there's I think really we're going to look back now on one of the down periods was, of course, like 20, 21, 22 was starting to finally come out of, but like there was a period there, of course, by virtue of literally society was changing. We're out of that now, but like, of course, that had something to do
2020
with,
just don't even really count because that's just,
kind of a lost year.
Yeah. 2021 I want to look at real quick before we move on, but we'll get to 2025 at the end as far as talking about things coming up. But 2021 wasn't terrible. You had Licorice Pizza, Dune, The Green Knight, Spencer, Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, French Dispatch. After that, it is quite a bit of a drop here of In the Heights, No Time to Die, Many Saints of Newark, Don't Breathe 2. The fact that Many Saints of Newark is on a top 10, though, is not good. In fact, I like Don't Breathe 2 better than that. I don't know why that's... Yeah, whatever. Anyway, that was a pretty bad year. I didn't even obviously make a top 10 for 2020. I just wanted... 2019. Oh, wow. Okay. Last thing here to talk about with that. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, The Irishman, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Waves, Little Women, Uncut Gems, Deadwood the Movie, Her Smell, Us, and Rolling Thunder Review.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like a whole other time and era now where you had the stuff that all that came out. But
Parasite came out that year too, just to mention, and some other big stuff. Anyway, we'll talk more about 2025 at the end and get into that. But we'll go ahead and get started, I guess.
All right, so...
The blue plates have been put away. They're in storage.
Yeah, don't worry. They'll be back one day. Yeah. Not now, though. So, as we did last time, of course, Levi and I love to read. So, we wanted to honor the James Elroy Award For favorite books read in 2024, I'll have Levi go first. So, Levi, your favorite book read in 2024 is... Oh, sorry, it's repeating 2 envelopes.
Wait, hang on. You
Yeah.
don't want to rip that many open
Yeah.
yet. Hang on. This ain't daggum Bonnie and Clyde actors up here screwing it up. Mine was Bill Buford's Among the Thugs, which is a nonfiction book about soccer hooliganism in the 1980s primarily and 90s. There probably isn't a book I've read that I've got more into immediately than that. It's got a very striking cover of like a skinhead kid like smoking a cigarette. It's very like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But he was actually an American who lived in England, and he wrote for some English newspapers, and he basically, the story kind of starting, and I think I talked about this maybe a little bit back when I read it, but and him talking about basically running into soccer hooligans and starting to kind of join their group. It's kind of like what I would randomly call the Gen X version of Hell's Angels, sort of. I mean, and a little bit different because it's not written by a Gen X person. It's not really involving Gen X people, but it's kind of that era, you know.
Right.
But basically about him, traveling around with those people. And you would think, oh, that sounds like it's literally just like Hunter S. Thompson's Hell's Angels, but that's kind of why it's great. But also, no, it comes from a different kind of lens of thing. Totally love that book. I'm a fan in general of new journalism and putting oneself into the work, and I kind of write that way in my own personal reviews and certain things of just mainly, and it's kind of a sociological book, and it's not really about the game of soccer. Mm-hmm. It's about all these
the
other
culture behind it, yeah.
people, and so it mainly followed a group of Manchester United fans, and throughout England, but also to Dusseldorf, Germany at one point, and then the biggest section is at the World Cup in 1990 when they went to Milan. Or Turin, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
When they went to Turin, there were some games in Milan, I think, too, maybe. But when they went to the city of Turin, Italy, and it actually ended similarly to Hell's Angels, where he got beat up by some of the police that were there. And he talked about that experience in great detail about what that was like to be hit with nightsticks for about 3 minutes straight.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, I think I was kind of done after that, and then he kind of gave up. Really great book. I know I would read portions of it to you, and you would just laugh. It was literally some of the most unbelievable stuff. The names of people, the things they did, talking about people would drive motorcycles through, like, markets and subways and stuff, and then there was people, a lot of them would, like, basically get to games and travel by stealing money off of people. They called it, I can't remember if they called it on the grift or they called it something. It was the whole thing was not that they didn't have money. It was they were trying to see how far they could go without having to pay anything. And it was just, it's just total madness. And it's a good, because it's about sports in a big way, but also just about human behavior in general and kind of a study of groupthink and how that ultimately kind of also leads to fascism, and it was very interesting. It's a very liberal book in a lot of ways too, as far as its thoughts on the way that people act and the things they do, and so yeah, that was a great book that I recommend for anybody who's interested.
Yeah, I've definitely heard great things about it, and you talking about it made me more interested. Any
it's
other
pretty
books
short
you'd like to shout out that you read
I guess
in
I should
2024?
mention I finally read all of Against the Day, and that took like 3 months. I'm not even kidding.
It's a big book.
I quite liked it. It's actually one of my lesser favorites of Pynchon for a lot of different reasons that I won't necessarily go into, and I think I talked about it on here before.
Yeah, you might have, yeah.
But that was quite an experience to live through for that long. I'm actually glad it kind of took me that long. It made the book feel bigger and wider in a lot of ways than it even was, and which is saying something. So yeah, the only sad thing about that is that I only have one more book of his I haven't read, Bleeding Edge, and I know that's short, and then that'll be it. So I'm kind of been putting that on the shelf, letting it marinate and wait for a while, because I've read half of it before anyway, never finished it. And then one other book I wanted to shout out was Ohio by Stephen Markley, which I read earlier in the year. Was a big fan of that. That's kind of like a pseudo crime story about one night in a town in Ohio, and these 4 people who used to live there, who all actually come back to the town on the same night and kind of run into each other. But and it becomes at the end, there's sort of a MacGuffin and like a thing, not a MacGuffin in terms of like a valuable, but this thing that happens between these people that leads to a murder, and it kind of devolves into. Well, I'd say that's actually the genius of the book, is that it kind of slowly and kind of secretly devolves into a crime novel at the end. Not all that, like, obviously, and kind of more organically. So, yeah, that's a really pretty great book. And so, yeah, I definitely recommend that. And I read some other books, but those were the ones I mostly thought of, obviously. So.
All right, good deal. So, my selection... Well, let me unmute my... Well,
and I read the corrections, and that was good.
Jonathan Franzen's corrections. So, my James Elroy Award for favorite book read in 2024 is... I need to, 2 envelopes again. Northwoods by Daniel Mason, which I know is also a book.
Yeah, I also read that.
Read. I know this is one of those books that, like, I remember when I first saw the cover for it. It's actually a 2023.
It's
originally
a little
was
older
released.
by now. Yeah, but
in October, I think, of 2023. I read it this last year, early in the year. You read Among the Thugs pretty early in the year too, right?
Yeah, it was.
I was actually thinking that
February.
both of ours were early in the year, and I think, would you agree that, and this is sometimes true of, like, not even necessarily new movies, but like some movies that you see early in the year, they have time to marinate in your head and kind of be placed almost on a pedestal.
There's not a whole lot going on either, because it's that weird time of the year where it's cold outside, it's before spring, and it's kind of, that's when honestly you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck as far as mind space of something, because that's when the things, nothing's happening. So
anyway, I just thought about that with both of our books, but
because it was the same for me last year with the Shards. I mean, that like took over my headspace
exact same
for like
thing
a month.
For Freedom for me
so,
the year before. But Daniel Mason's book Freedom, which I know he's written some other books before. This is the first that I've read. This is one of those books that, again, when it first came out, I saw covers of everywhere. It got praised by New York Times. It got named by a lot of places as one of the best books of 2023. I finally read it, and I absolutely loved it. It's a book that I've already bought several times for people. Basically follows a single house over the span of several centuries, and basically it's Western Massachusetts. All the various people who come to live in the house, and obviously it's a cross-generational tale, so the characters change throughout the course of the book.
Yeah.
But it's all about how the legacies of the people, literally and figuratively, kind of are left in the place, and that you have all these new people that come in with their own problems and their own issues in their lives, and how nature's this thing that remains present all throughout and kind of grows over and remolds and reshapes the fabric of this time and this place into these new times, but the place remains the same. It's a book very much about place and about all these, again, various people who live there. And again, I love literally and figuratively ghosts and the legacies of past people that kind of haunt the place. Not in a horror kind of way, but more so spiritually, just kind of reside in this place. It's a book that I don't want to get too far down the line of talking about what this year meant for a lot of people, but it was for a lot of people, in different ways, a tough year as far as some things that happened this year. And one thing that I found to be quite comforting about the book is that while our circumstances, can go up or down, that nature's, and obviously for our perspective, spirituality and the presence of God is not nearly as fluid, that it's something that's ever present, that it's something that's omnipresent, and that life will go on past our own lives here on earth, not only for ourselves, but for God's own creation itself. So it's kind of not a book that's really preaching at you, but I think does have a powerful message of spirituality as found in nature and how it can
Yeah.
persist and go on. So,
Yeah,
really
I was a
love
big
this
fan of
book.
the book as well, and Kyle recommended it to me. Actually, you gave it to me for my birthday, I believe.
I think it was.
And I read it a month or two after that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a really great book to read, and I wouldn't call it so much an experimental novel because it's a bad idea to sometimes use the term experimental because I'd recently watched some I've been watching through some Stan Brakhage, and then when you use the word experimental for other things, you're like, oh, never mind. But yeah, it kind of plays around a little bit with the form of the novel.
It actually has a striking resemblance to a film we're going to be talking about later. Maybe we can, Robert Zemeckis movie that came out this past year that we'll maybe mention. We can go back to that. But anyways, it's one of those books like Lincoln in the Bardo, also almost 10 years ago now, that I've already bought for several people, and I know is going to be a consistent gift I give to people because of just how beautiful and powerful the book is. So strongly recommend Northwoods by Daniel Mason. Some other contenders for me, I'll just mention really quick. I jumped on board the Nathan Hill train and read his book that came out about 10 years ago now for the first time, The Knicks, which is a really great book as somebody who obviously loves and thinks about the 60s a lot. It's kind of a cross-generational tale as well that I don't want to say too much about, but I'd strongly recommend. I know that also was very praised. And then a book that came out maybe a year or two ago now, it's been a little while, Wellness, he also did, which is also one that I really love a lot. So love both of those books and would recommend those. Those, honestly, I have struggled to pick between those two because I really love the Knicks, but then I read Wellness and really loved that, and it's like picking between those. I was like, this or that, and I was like, why don't I actually go for Northwoods by Daniel Mason? So those are three books in general I would strongly recommend. So
that wasn't the envelope, but it was something else.
So moving on to our next category. We will get to films, I promise, but we want to go ahead and get some things out of the way that were not quite expressly film-related. But our TV show of the year, I know last year we gave it to Beef, and I'll be honest, I haven't watched a whole lot of contemporary television. I know Levi hasn't either, and we've kind of both been watching separate things anyways. So our favorite TV show of the year, Levi, I'll let you do the honors here. It goes to
Batman the Caped Crusader. And we keep ripping these envelopes. They're laying all over the place. So
just bear with me on that. I'll probably get it figured out by the time
we should also say that The Penguin is a show that came out and we know everybody loved, and we watched the pilot for, and we're really into. We just haven't continued to watch any of it because we were watching it with our dad, and it's kind of hard sometimes to get the schedule just right for that.
Yeah.
But Batman the Caped Crusader is a sort of unofficial continuation for Bruce Timm of Batman the Animated Series in a 1940s context. That's just a little bit grittier than that show was, in the sense of that it's like about some more adult things here and there. It's a little more violent.
Well, I would say, like you said, it's kind of a spiritual continuation. I know pretty much the voice cast is all different, but and obviously it doesn't exactly look like a carbon copy of what that looked like, but it's clearly still going for that Art Deco noir vibe that Batman the Animated Series excelled in. I know there's been a little bit of a fan backlash to this online of people thinking that it's like a light, inferior version of the animated series, and I would agree it's not quite as good.
Well, why would we need to have the same thing?
I would agree, and I think, one thing I appreciate is that it takes a lot of characters, of course, that are iconic in the Batman film canon, and it does things slightly different with them. There's a little bit of a backlash to that as well. I know. Yeah. I personally love that the Penguin was a woman in this. That was just something different and welcome, I thought.
Yeah, and certain characters that were gay and certain things that were changed. I mean, they did
Harley
the same
Quinn
thing.
is like also been changed to be like kind of
Asian woman,
more Asian woman.
Yeah. But yeah, and then there's the whole thing people made a big deal about when Watchmen came out about Hooded Justice being black, and it's just like that just shows imagination. Yeah. And a lot of people can say, oh, it's just because they're trying to PC everything. It's like
DEI is the big buzzword.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, all I can all I can say without getting too political is, well, don't worry, everything's going to change with that now. So whatever, I guess you're happy. But no, I mean that's just called representation of new voices and new ideas.
And also,
I mean,
how many versions of Batman have existed?
Yeah.
Well, you should basically be able to do practically anything within reason. Because
I mean, it's the same thing people were talking about when they had, and of course, and we don't even need to get into the James Bond news about that getting sold away from the Bercolis into the MGM through Amazon and whatever. Not going to even touch that, but the last movie that was made of No Time to Die, they had the female version of James Bond in that, or the new designation of 007, and people were like, oh my god, ooh, and she was black and a woman, and it's like, why not do something different just to be different? Why is it bad just to be different? You know what I mean? Like, they're saying, oh, they're just doing that to be different or be this. It's like, well, fine, good, whatever. Like, it just seems kind of like a waste of my time and my intellectual prowess. Other than the fact that representation is important, let me be clear about that.
Yeah.
It just seems like a waste of time to just do the same thing over and over and over.
But I think you would agree that this new series came out on Amazon Prime, and it was just great to see a version of Bruce Timm Batman back in our lives. And so, again, didn't really break the form or change the mold or in a huge way, but I just thought it's cool to have just a little, like a new Batman show that's airing, and I'm not sure when the new season will be coming out. But again, we didn't watch a lot of. I know there's a lot of stuff that's been in the TV, ecosphere, and again over the last so many years, and we just do not watch as much contemporary TV as we used to. So it's just part of the deal.
So it's just, I don't know, nothing really good's been being made on TV.
I know a lot of people are really praising Severance a lot as a new great show. I mean, I know Levi just kind of is not made his displeasure clear. And it's something that hypothetically I could see myself trying out, but there's just so much.
Here's the deal,
and it's an Apple show too, so obviously that's
whatever, that don't even exist. Here's the deal. With all this stuff, it all comes down to the fact that why does it, like, with all these shows aside, why does every show or every movie or whatever have to have some kind of supernatural element or science fiction element? Like, can't we just tell regular stories anymore? And I know people are like always trying to come up with a new thing, but it's like, I look at that show and it's like, it's like the people go in the workplace and then they're like different people. It's like, oh, let me guess, is that supposed to be a metaphor for something? Like, what do you think, I'm an idiot? Like, in the words of the red M&M in that ad, what do you think, I'm an idiot? And he falls over. I don't know, I just look at that and literally laugh, and I'm like, that sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, I don't care about that, don't want to watch it, never will, moving on. Any questions?
So
but you know what I mean? It's like, that just feels like that's what a lot of TV is these days, and that's just not anything I'm interested in. So,
moving now into films or cinema, but before we get to contemporary movies,
you keep waiting for us to get there, and we're not getting.
We're almost there. We obviously like to watch a lot of older movies as well, as you know by this podcast. Me and Levi were talking. We actually didn't see a lot of big older works of cinema that sometimes we're accustomed to kind of seeing for the first time. So we have a little bit fewer of that to choose from. But our favorite pre-2024 movie that we saw for the first time this past year is... I don't know why. Just bear with it. The Forbidden Room, which
now
we did a
this
whole
on the
podcast on,
so we won't make this very long. What are your Guy Madden speak?
I love Guy Madden.
I guess is the way to put it.
I've not seen all. We've not seen all of his stuff.
No, he's
obviously.
made a lot. So.
I'm really torn between whether I like this or My Winnipeg the best, because I feel like Forbidden Room is the ultimate graduation of what he does. I think that's the pinnacle of what he's been building to. What I love though about My Winnipeg is that it's something personal, which is not something that I immediately associate with him, because, and I say this with love, a lot of his movies are about taking the pastiche of silent and early sound cinema and transforming it into something else. My Winnipeg is kind of a version of that, but it's also from this very personal place. And so I think that has an emotional maturity that is superior to the rest of his work, even though the Forbidden Room is like the greatest version of what he does, if that makes any sense. So I'm torn between saying what my exact favorite of those are, but I think the Forbidden Room, like I said, is the pinnacle of everything he had been building towards by that point in terms of his appropriation of silent cinema, early sound cinema, and taking it and, I think, isn't there like a blurb in the trailer that says something like there's more ideas in 5 or 15 minutes of this movie than there are whole filmographies, and there are whole oeuvres, I think is what it says. And I think that's so correct because, just when you think you got a handle on, I think I figured out what this movie's trying to go for or be, and you do know that by the end. But
and you're like, wait, the volcano's having a dream. We got to see what that is.
It's
like
so. I mean, such a joy to watch, and just so transformational in so many ways. So we did a whole podcast about it, so we don't need to belabor it too much. But Forbidden Room is such a brilliant work of
it is
cinema.
my favorite of his movies because I think My Winnipeg is great. But I'm also a big fan of the saddest music in the world, which I really like a lot too. I just really love everything about this, especially because I came upon it. I've told this story before on the podcast, and I've told it elsewhere about going to the Cucalor. Well, I went to part of the Cucalores Film Festival where I'd seen a screening of The Shining along with Joe Dutton and Garrett Browning, and also Q&A afterwards of Vivian Kubrick. I sat within 5 feet of her. Hello. Anyway, point is, during that, they were showing another movie, which I thought about going across town to go see, called Forbidden Trim, which I have since seen. It's a exploitation movie about surfing, directed by a guy who directs a lot of surfing movies. It's pretty much my thing. Anyway, so I got confused about what the name was at one point, or I was looking online, see, is that on yet? Of course, it was in its film festival time at that time. But came across The Forbidden Room, which had been out for about a year at that point on Netflix. Netflix Instant. It wasn't called Instant anymore. But and saw some of it and was like, what is this? This is crazy. But I was like, I kind of like this, but didn't finish it. I'm actually glad I didn't, because I probably wouldn't have appreciated it as much. Totally love everything about this movie. I think it's lived in my mind for a long time, and it was good to finally see it. I think I just love the nature of the movie to just move about the way it does. And we're actually going to talk about another movie that's very Guy Madden influenced later on. That reminded me a lot of this movie in certain ways, as far as the lumberjack parts of the movie. Like the lumberjack parts of the movie. You remember that? Yeah. But yeah, it's just the type of movie that feels otherworldly, and truly different and truly fresh. That movies I wish were always felt like that. Not even that they were always like this, but it's kind of the thing that reminds you all movies can still be something different, even for him,
Yeah, we really love this movie. I'm trying to remember. We did a double feature of it with
The Four Feathers.
That's right.
Which I'm probably going to sell on eBay soon, by the way. So if you're hearing this and it hasn't been sold, go buy it. It's a good movie. I just don't want it anymore.
Yeah. I would say
The Four Feathers, by the way. I'm keeping Forbidden Room, by the way, just to be clear.
Yeah. So, Forbidden Room. When was it we did that? Oh, it was back in the summer. Yeah, June 28th.
That image I'd forgotten about.
Yeah. So check that out if you haven't already. All right, now it's time, Levi, to get into the nitty gritty of 2024 in film. So, our first award for the best creepy crawl, aka horror movie of 2024, is. One day I'll figure it out.
I'm sorry, I just keep laughing at that.
Lisa Frankenstein, which we talked about on the pod.
Yeah.
And I know that I went back and looked. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd, so I did not even give it a very high rank. But it's just it just felt like it was playing in its own sandbox. And I think, like horror movies, a lot of them market themselves as something really different and bold and big, and then they turn out they're one of like 3 or 4 versions of
that
a
came
horror
out
movie.
that year.
Right,
It
and
feels
so,
like,
and for all, I don't think it was an eminently flawed movie, but for Lisa Frankenstein's faults, it's just vibe and aesthetic was something that just felt like, oh, this is playing in its own sandbox and playground, and I really loved it, and it's something that even as I don't know, it's grown in my estimation in my head in terms of just it feeling like its own little thing.
Yeah.
I think we talked about it back when it came
Yeah,
out,
we did.
but
I mean,
any new reflections or thoughts
just
about
a
it?
really funny movie, and we're going to talk later on towards the very end about a horror comedy we just saw that actually really is a horror comedy. This isn't exactly that. I mean, it's more of a comedy in its own way than it's explicitly horror movie, kind of like Beetlejuice would be,
Yeah.
But I don't know, the tone of like, oh, these parents are, spoiler, by the way, these parents are either dead or about to die, or that's the stepmother got killed. And then it's like, oh, haha, she's like, about the scene where there's like a vibrator being used and like that mixed with that, and it's like all these like tones that go together but work, and so that was pretty great that it was able to accomplish that. So that's a movie we just wanted to set down in ink or on the airwaves somewhere, and we already did it at the beginning of the year, but proof that it wasn't forgotten about, because it's a movie that really has gotten forgotten about almost in the moment too. So very confusing. Don't really understand that.
Directed by Zelda Williams. Also is written by Diablo Cody, who's kind of a superstar, one of the few superstar screenwriters I would say in terms of being known. And it came out back in February 2024, obviously. So again, it's kind of went by the wayside, and I feel like it has been forgotten about. But it was one that we quite liked. So this is the time to just mention Longlegs, because I feel like Longlegs was hyped to be, and for some people was the horror movie of 2024. And, I feel like, that, and this is the thing with a lot of horror movies. And I say this as somebody who's warmed up to the genre literally over the course of us doing this podcast. But ultimately, like, it was a feat of marketing, and I think that's true of a lot of horror movies as opposed to the actual filmmaking itself, because
when it's not in the trailer, it's like the 9 circles of hell in a book, and I started laughing, and I was like, okay, let's do it. And then it's like, then actually I did just laugh through most of the movie, but not in a good way. Yeah. It was not meant to be a horror comedy.
So I feel like for some people that would be the obvious choice for the best horror movie of the year. But I'm not as taken with.
I mean, that movie had an awesome opening. When we talked about it at the time, really loved the opening like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then like pretty much other movies that do that, then it kind of fell off and it never really got back on its feet again. I mean, Midsummer was the same way. So
right. Yeah. So and I'm sure that might be a shock to some people. Lisa Frankenstein, really?
The answer is yes.
But more so because we wanted to shout it out and say, hey, you know what? This was something that we thought was worthy of attention. So, Lisa Frankenstein, our best creepy crawl.
Creepy crawl.
Next up.
James Crawl.
James Crawford. The Comeback Player of the Year, which, of course, represents someone who... had a pretty good, and I think this is, there's some gradations of what this could mean, because last year our honoree was, the winner of the Harry Dean Award, was Alden Ehrenreich, mostly for Oppenheimer, but also Cocaine Bear, which he was in. Mm-hmm. This year we're giving it to Edward Norton for his performance as Pete Seeger in A Complete Unknown. Now, Edward Norton is not someone who's like had this massive fall from grace, even in the same way that, say, Alden Ehrenreich has post Solo.
Yeah.
But
I love you, Solo. I know.
But I think with Edward Norton, did you ever see Motherless Brooklyn? I can't remember. Okay, you've not.
You literally have talked to me about it for probably 2 hours of combined time over the past couple of years. So.
Yeah, so that was one of the most head-scratching whole projects I've ever seen, because that's such a great book, and I feel like it was
Well, it was
Edward
like
Norton,
changed the setting.
Yeah, it changed the setting,
yeah.
the time period, and like also it's actually now kind of about Robert Moses, and it's like that was not what the novel was about. So I mean, I want to see a Robert Moses movie. Don't get me wrong. I think Alec Baldwin played the I'd say the motherless Brooklyn, the
Moses.
the Moses analog or whatever. Just a very head scratching movie. And I know it was one that Edward Norton directed, so I think that he put a lot of energy into
Motherless
that.
broker, like.
But and you know, this is our first chance we can really talk about A Complete Unknown, because that's of course came out.
Well, we talked about it a lot.
We did talk about it on the Mad Men.
Yeah. So if you
Blow
want to
and
hear
Smoke
about all
podcast.
that, go
That's
there. But
true.
we
did
didn't
do
talk
that.
a lot about Edward Norton in that, though. So now's the time to do that.
So, like, I feel like, you know, I'm not going to go out on a huge limb and talk about Edward Norton's actually one of our greatest actors of a certain generation, but he
that
is
limb
like,
would snap. Believe me, I'll go ahead and
but
tell
he
you.
is like a really good actor.
Yeah,
you know,
he's fine,
and
yeah.
I think he as
I've liked him as he's gotten older. I'll say that.
Yeah.
In his younger years, I wasn't as apt to praise him as
I
I
feel
am
like
now.
obviously
but-
most people, when they hear Edward Norton's name, they're going to think of Fight Club. Of course, that's the biggest movie he's really ever going to be a part
or
of, probably.
American History X, or
That too, yeah. So, I mean, Edward Norton...
American History
X. A really good actor, but I think with Pete Seeger, this gave him an opportunity to, well, do a little bit of an accent and some voice work, which is always welcome.
Well, he came to us and he wrote us a little song, and now we're going to play it.
But, you know, obviously all the expectations of what is the Bob Dylan A Complete Unknown going to be. Let me just say, Timothée Chalamet, I think, did an amazing job as Bob Dylan. So, you know, we're not really going to mention him again exactly throughout this. But obviously I think he did do a great job. But I think what Edward Norton's Pete Seeger performance gives the movie is the conscience and, like, the actual... Because... the actual conscience of what folk music was and why it felt like a betrayal when Bob Dylan went against it, or when he went just as another way. He didn't want to get pinned down by that. Again, this has been a talking point for 60 years, so I don't want to
I haven't ever heard about that.
rehash all this too much. But like, I feel like with, you know, the delicacy of the Pete Seeger performance of him saying this is what folk music is, this is why it was important, this is why it felt like an alternative to the trash culture of what they saw as the 50s and the early 60s like was, and that rock and roll represented this kind of stealing and appropriation of the soul of folk music. And I feel like he just represented that very well, very delicately. And so I just think that he was a randomly really great performance in a movie that actually had great performances all across it.
Yeah, there was this
across the board.
scene where he talked about the people with the shovel and talking about getting, you know, the or the seesaw or whatever, and talking about getting people to be into folk music and how and it like saying it takes everybody to do a little bit, and you brought a shovel and you know, but we want you to keep doing folk music because we need your help. And he's like, nah, I ain't gonna do that.
Yeah,
you know, but
just to shout out some other actors in
scene,
that. Elle Fanning, of course, she's always consistently great.
Yeah.
Monica Barbaro as Joan Baez was terrific. Randomly really great, not in it a whole lot, but Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash, which of course part of the irony is James Mangold already made a Johnny Cash movie.
Yeah.
And what I love about watching the Boyd Holbrook in it, it feels like we're getting a slice of a sequel Johnny Cash movie almost, like from the guy who did the first one.
Yeah.
And then a silent but great performance by Scoot McNairy as Woody Guthrie in the hospital. So that whole movie actually
James Austin Johnston is the Gerd's MC.
He does the best Bob Dylan impression, so look that up.
How do you turn it on? Yeah.
So anyways, movie filled with great performances. And again, I don't think Chalamet almost weirdly gets enough credit for what that performance means and represents, like, for not only his own career, but also depictions of Bob Dylan. So he's great. But I think in particular, Edward Norton, and again, he was not in some huge, massive career slump, but it was like, hey, by the way, Edward Norton can be great, like, just in case you forgot, you know. So any other thoughts about that or A Complete Unknown in general?
Both good.
Yeah. All right, so next up is Film Score of the Year. And our winner for Film Score of the Year, certainly not going to this podcast, goes to... Why does it keep doing that? I don't know. Challengers. Of course, done by...
Luca Guadagnino?
Well, the movie was done by
right.
Luca Guadagnino.
Yes,
the
sorry.
score itself by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
So they're probably like, yeah, cool, another award,
cool.
but this
Well,
is a Harry Dean Award, and it's your first one.
Not the. Was it Trent Reznor said that stuff about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
which he then got inducted into.
Which is to me one of the great quotes though about
Yeah,
what he said about.
I don't
that.
give a F, you know what I mean.
But
yeah, I know what you mean, Trent.
We talked about Challengers, I guess, back when it came out.
Yeah.
I feel like of all the end of the year best of lists / awards stuff that's been going on, one of the more shafted movies in general, because love Guadagnino, his direction of the movie, love that trio of performances. Obviously, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross score, they're most probably associated with working with David Fincher and doing a lot, especially the Social Network.
Well, they've gotten into now making a lot of scores for random things. I mean, they did it for Watchmen. They did it for Soul randomly.
Yeah.
They've done a lot of random things.
Yeah,
but,
so they've done things now out. Wow, the Trent Reznor
it fits.
Wikipedia picture is just wow. Okay. Criticisms of the music industry. That's a whole little section of his Wikipedia
What
page.
if there's a section you say criticisms towards Nine Inch Nails? It's like, and it's him. It's like, wait, what?
But that score
Yeah.
was just so propulsive, and I think they obviously they and Guadagnino through collaboration really tennis is such a specifically intense sport because of the back and the forth of it, and that score just really injected that movie with a much needed.
Yeah, because obviously
life.
there's the scenes of them actually playing tennis, but there's also very specifically, I talked about it at the time, there's that great scene between Zendaya and what's that guy's name that's that played Prince,
Josh O'Connor.
Yeah, Josh O'Connor that played old Prince.
Philip.
No, not Philip. What's our king now? Well, our king.
He's not my king.
Charles.
Prince
Charles. I can't remember his name. Sorry. Yeah, Josh O'Connor and Zendaya are like arguing, and it starts with them like on one side of the room, and then the camera, it's like one take kind of, and then they slowly get down into like the floor and are like right at each other arguing and throwing these like insults back and forth like it's a tennis match, literally, and it's like, and the music is really great in that sequence, and it becomes kind of a wide shot to like a close up of them arguing. It's really great. I remember that scene thinking, man, this is just how you make movies. So yeah, that was a really great score. The Brutalist was another one I thought a lot about, but don't worry, we got something for that coming down the way.
Yeah.
I also did want to take now to mention that there was another Luca Guadagnino movie we didn't get to see this year called Queer, which was that adaptation of a William S. Burroughs book.
Daniel Craig was kind of the biggest thing that came out of that movie in terms of awards attention. As the lead in it.
But yeah, it's like like I said, William S. Burroughs kind of sort of weird memoir. I can never get my whole brain to totally approach the William S. Burroughs thing with any clarity.
I started Naked Lunch. It was either last year or the year before. I read like the first 10 pages, and I was like, I'm going to read this one day, but not right now. And so I'll do that later on.
I mean, it's all in that very, like, I'd say it seems like his stuff's kind of like Henry Miller meets Hunter S. Thompson kind of like view of the world, which is a pretty effed up way to live. But anyway. But yes, that was another movie I really wanted to see this year, but didn't get around to.
But anyways, Challengers, we loved. And like I said, it would, I think, be in my top 10 if I made one, very likely. So
look at Guadagnino secretly just making all these great movies all the time.
Yeah, he's like been pumping out a lot over this last so many years. So, does he have anything set for this year?
Not that I'm aware.
Let's just look real quick. I know that he's apparently, there's a lot of movies he's developing. One of which is the a Sergeant Rock adaptation for DC Comics. I know. Like
what?
Yeah, I know.
What?
It's like impossible. He's got a movie coming out this year called After the Hunt. It stars Julia Roberts,
What's it say it's about?
College professor is forced to grapple with her own secretive past after one of her colleagues is faced with serious accusation. It's described as a thriller. Michael Stuhlbarg, Ayo Abid, I can't remember how to say her name. Adebri, Andrew Garfield, Chloe Sevigny. Comes out in October.
Cool.
So that'll probably be it sounds like it's about Me Too, cancel culture kind of thing, so we'll see how that goes.
Kind of like Tar almost.
That's what, kind of.
Yeah, and of course he's still, I don't know if he's still attached to do the Shards or not. I mean, he's one of those people, he's kind of like a better version of Guillermo del Toro because he makes actually great movies. Sorry, I had to, you always got to get a dig in there. But I think that, he's one of them people that like it gets, what does it say here before I even keep going?
Jacob Elordi's reportedly in talks to role. Ellis revealed that the adaptation, Christopher Borgli signed on to direct. It sounds like Guadagnino's not really involved anymore. Ryan Murphy's revealed to be in closing talks to revive the project at a different network. So it's not like it's kind of going through different.
Well, Ryan Murphy can sometimes actually be good when he wants to.
So there's a lot of not great Ryan Murphy products, but there is the Assassination of Gianni Versace, which is one of the best seasons of TV in any era, I would say.
Yes.
That was a brilliant
So if it can be kind of like that, maybe we'll get something good out of that. But that's what I was going to say, and I was proved correct, is that Luca Guadagnino is like Guillermo del Toro, but once again, actually makes great movies. But that he has this list of movie projects that just gets so long, it's like, you're not going to be able to get through all these.
I don't know what status the adaptation of the Bob Dylan album Blood on the Tracks was also something that had been mentioned a while back.
Yeah, and it's like they were going to make a Call Me By Your Name sequel at one point, and I think it was going to be even outside of Find Me, which finally got written and put out. But then all the Armie Hammer stuff happened, and it's like, who knows?
But like I remember when we talked about the Shards, and we talked about Luca Guadagnino, you were like, oh my, he would be great for that, and who knows if that's actually going to happen.
That's probably not going to as far as him, but oh
well. So we'll see what happens with
So
that.
Challengers, great score.
It was a great movie too.
Yeah.
Also, like I feel like in the people make all these conversations or topics all the time. Like if this movie would have come out in the 90s or the 2000s, like it would have been more of a pop cinema phenomenon. Yeah. And I feel like if more people went to the movie theaters than they do, it would have been even more popular and kind of edgy in a Hollywood kind of way and also it's a great centerpiece for all three of those young leads. Obviously Zendaya's career is just getting bigger and bigger. Mike Faist or however you say his name.
Yes, he was also same year being in the Bike Riders, kind of a thankless role in that, but. Yeah.
But then, I mean, he was like, I would agree, a lot of people coming out of West Side Story was one of the big fans of that. And then, of course, Josh O'Connor, I know now has been rumored, could he be James Bond or could he be involved in the Beatles movie that's going to be happening? I think there's been rumors about that.
Which Beatle would he play? I wonder, which Beatle?
Has there been even official...
Which Beatle would he play?
I know, I think Barry Keoghan, how do you say his name?
I don't know.
Was maybe rumored to be Ringo.
That's about
and
right.
Paul Mescal as Paul, I think. I don't know if those were official, if those were rumors or fan casts or whatever. I can't really remember. But
I'd say you do Paul Mescal as John and do Josh O'Connor as Paul.
And you got to get George. I don't know.
Well, that's going to be, you got to find somebody who's really cool to do that.
So. But anyway, so we'll see what happens with that. All right, next up, breakout performance of the year. And my choice for that
we split on this one.
Is... Well, I think I finally figured
finally
it out.
got it! All right.
Corey Michael Smith as Chevy Chase in Saturday Night. This is a movie...
did you know that Saturday Night Live...
Mm-hmm. What about
Did you know that Saturday Night Live?
Did it exist?
That Saturday Night Live?
Yeah. So obviously there's been a lot of talk this last year. This is the 50th anniversary kind of season of course, groundbreaking sketch show.
Saturday Night Live!
We all know as Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
This was the origin story movie, of course.
Originally it was called Saturday Night.
Did we...
Pretty good impression, I gotta say, don't you?
Did we cover this movie?
I know we
talked
so.
about the speculation leading up to it.
I think it was in that weird period even when we weren't doing a podcast.
Before we started.
Right, and we
Blowing
wouldn't have
Smoke.
really talked about it with Blowing Smoke.
So I feel like this is a movie that is, this to me is the most like, movie of the year. I know we've got a whole other category called eye roll of the year, which is a whole other thing. This is the most down the middle I can think of, actually, a movie I've seen in like years, where it's like there are certain things I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of like this, and then other things I'm like, oh, why? I'm randomly have to be one of the biggest, I don't know if fans, but like studiers of the career of Jason Reitman.
You've got to be number one. I can't think of anybody else who gives a crap.
I'm just fascinated by him more than I know I should be. I think he's got randomly...
Tully, you were there day one. Labor Day, you were like, I must study this text. The front runner, you were like,
I'm just going to go ahead and say this now. One day we will do Men, Women, and Children on this podcast, because that is one of the most eye roll times 5 movies of all time I've ever seen.
That's that scene where it's like Timothy Chalamet and Axel Elgort both fight each other, right?
Yeah, that is in that movie.
It's like, well, we know who won out there. So,
but anyways, so I'm fascinated by him. His first 3 movies, by the way, are still like so high quality. Of course, Thank You for Smoking, Juno, and Up in the Air. I'm definitely one of the biggest Up in the Air /flag wavers.
I've seen that and Thank You for Smoking, and both of those are good. So yeah, Up in the Air. Really
anyways,
pretty good.
Obviously, his dad
made films with the
Ghostbusters. No, yeah, he did not officially have anything to do
Reitman
with Saturday Night Live.
Jay Leno. I don't know. I'm just saying names.
I'm just saying NBC.
NBC Saturday Night
Main Event.
Yeah.
Hulk
Hogan. Mean Gene Okerlund.
Scheme Gene. As Scott Hall says.
Anyway.
One day we will get back to this movie.
Scott Hall.
Scottrick Hall.
Scottrick Hall.
So, obviously, he made a lot of movies that were not sometimes not officially SNL movies, but they were part of that generation.
Yeah.
And so, of course, his own dad's relationship, too. And a lot of people said he's nepotism, the director, anyways.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of criticism.
I'd say Sam Levinson is that, actually.
Oh, well, he's the even worse version of that, I would say. But, so, again, I'm so down the middle about this movie, because I think the best thing about it is its cast.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember the actor who played Sammy Fableman.
I'll read the names in the voice. Hang on.
Because we know Levi's getting a lot of traction.
I realize I can do it, so I'm like, yeah. Gabriel LaBelle.
That's so real quick. He plays Lorne Michaels.
Yeah.
Real quick before.
Okay. No. You go ahead. Yeah.
Plays Lorne Michaels. I don't know if you know this, Levi, but Lorne Michaels is the guy behind Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was being sarcastic.
Yeah.
All right.
Rachel Sennott
as Rosie Schuster, who was a writer for SNL. I think she was romantically involved. I think she was even married to Lorne Michaels from 1967 to 1980. So,
Corey Michael Smith
as Cheverlin Chase,
which is what we're here to talk about.
Cornelius Crane Chevy Chase. That's his full name.
Yeah.
What I loved about this performance more than anything, and by the way, he's been Corey Michael
he was
Smith
in like
has been
Carol.
In
he was in May December.
Several
he was
Todd
in
Haynes movies.
Yeah.
So he's like not.
He was the guy
totally...
in Carol that got the fake gun sound pointed at him.
Right.
If you recall,
yes.
Go back to that podcast that we did on that if y'all haven't heard it. But yeah.
Corey Michael Smith did a very magical thing, and it's like, oh wow, make me understand the charm of Cheverlin Chase.
Yeah.
Because I thought he just did a great job of it. It was not exactly an impression, but it was like, obviously he looked like him. He had that smugness. He had that arrogance. But he also had that ability to just like hold and carry a room. I really remember that scene where Gabriel LaBelle's Lorne Michaels has to go out and like give a little talk to all these like I think they like TV affiliates. Do you remember that scene?
Yes.
It was like this scene where he has to go give a speech to these affiliates, and like Corey Michael Smith is like, as Chevy Chase, has to go in there with him, and he's the one who really kind of saves the day and makes him feel better about the show.
Right.
Because real quick, this whole episode or this whole movie is about everything that led up to the very first episode of Saturday Night Live, and of course
when it was just called Saturday Night.
Yeah, and as the lead up to it and the whole like, is it gonna happen? I think a lot of people have said that there's a lot of things that exaggerated and obviously blew up into. But what I thought he did a great job as Chevy Chase and made me almost want to see him do the Chevy Chase movie in terms of just a movie that would be about Chevy Chase and again I think that would you agree?
You know what's funny is like I would rather watch a movie of him as Chevy Chase and Dylan O'Brien as
Dan Aykroyd.
Who
also was great.
Yes, but also I just really hate Dan Aykroyd,
right.
And so it was like,
would you
this
agree
is
he did
really
like a
annoying.
good version
Yes,
of him?
but I did not enjoy it,
Right.
if that's what you meant. Yes.
Yeah.
I would rather watch them do like a road movie as those characters of people than see the actual people do it, though. You know what I mean? Like, that would be way better.
We're not going to go through all these, but just to go through a few more. Nicholas Braun as a dual role of Andy Kaufman and Jim Henson.
Kaufman and Jim Henson.
One of my favorite scenes, too, was Nicholas Podany, I believe that's how you say his
As
name.
Billy Crystal.
It's like that one scene of him and that one writer, I remember, and they're like trying to like pitch Lauren on what can we get more time or whatever.
And he's like looking at all the cards, is that what you're talking about?
Right.
And he just takes them all down and he's like, there, you got your time? And they're like, whoa.
But that guy did a really great Billy Crystal, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
that was really
for
good.
one scene.
Yeah.
Robert Wool, our guy from way back, is Dave Wilson.
Paul Rust as Paul Schaefer.
Who's like a TV director.
He also had, I'm going to quit doing this for a minute, Matthew Reese as George Carlin. Sorry, I have to do it because I can't. Matthew Reese as George Carlin, the first guy on SNL. Host, whatever. I'm shaking in my boots.
Paul Rust. That's
that's
Paul
what I
Schaefer.
said. Yeah, and then Willem Dafoe, who, spoiler, we're going to be talking about here in a little bit.
I almost gave this to him because I quite liked him in this
who
too.
I actually liked a lot was Tommy Dewey as Michael O'Donoghue. That was that guy that was like one of the writers.
Oh, yeah, he was really good.
He had that really great scene, and I didn't agree with it religiously, his religiosity, but like him talking about to that woman who's like, we gotta
like
make sure that and he's like, tells her this whole story, and he's like, that's Jesus, by the way, is who I was talking about. Tells this like really awful story about they hung this guy on a cross and did all this blah blah blah, and it's like, that's Jesus, by the way. How do you like that? Yeah, and they're like basically saying, how effed up everything is, and it's like, a certain
Can't
way.
forget J.K. Simmons as Milton Berle also, which was quite
J.K. Just kidding, Simmons.
I will say
Milton Berle who takes out his wang.
There's
Vera Wang.
There's a lot of talk in the movie
His
about
Vera Wang handbag.
or obviously commentary through the movie about there was like SNL was a groundbreaking. It took a sledgehammer to what TV was. There is one scene that actually proves that this is true, I will say, where it cuts to like what the show that Milton Berle is making is. It feels like it was made 300 years ago. Not literally, but figuratively, in terms of just like how hand-me-down, old-fashioned, like that's what like a lot of
on the
old
green
school,
door, basically,
TV was,
Right.
and how obviously SNL, again, I think sometimes, SNL as an institution is such a big, massive thing, and we all know that, so I'm not going to act like it's not. But, like, the movie, of course, rests on this is the most groundbreaking TV event ever that happened. And there's a lot of cringe and eye-roll worthiness in that. But that one scene did show that very well in terms of this is what TV was, like, comedy, variety show type of thing was before
That Johnny Carson
SNL.
phone call conversation is pretty great.
That is also hilarious.
Yeah.
My single also, so we would agree the cast across the board was
good.
great.
Yeah.
We didn't really mention the guy who played Belushi. What was his name? Matt Wood as John Belushi in the movie also. And I'm sure like people who are SNL aficionados, they really like loved all the Easter eggs and things in this. But beyond the cast, the best thing about this movie was that comic thriller tone that it goes for. I personally did really love that.
Yeah.
Because not a lot of movies go for that or really successful at like that comic thrillerish kind of tone. So I really love that. And again, that scene of, you just said it, of that phone conversation between Lorne Michaels in the movie and Johnny Carson, which I wonder if actually even really happened or if it's a fictionalized version of something that did. Of that whole tone of that scene is like, it's hilarious, but it's also got this tension behind it, and the score adds to that. And just that whole scene's probably the scene of the movie to me in terms of just like this comic. It's all funny, but it's also there's this cutting edge thing that's going on there in terms of just like all this stuff's on the line with this. So
it's like he's talking to Johnny Carson on the phone, but that's not really the focus of the scene because there's other stuff that's going bad and going crazy.
But
then
you're
thinking about
deep down, you're caught up in this Johnny Carson impression that's been done over the phone. So the whole thing, the whole movie, is like, I would say is for me a really good 3 stars. It's like it's almost impossible that it's going to get above that for what it is, but it is randomly one of the movies of this year that is not in the hallowed category, but I do randomly think more about than I feel like it deserves to be.
Yeah.
You have any other thoughts on Saturday Night? But
no, it was good. I mean, it was better. I liked it more than I thought that I would. I'll say that. Yeah. I'm not going to talk as long about mine.
All right, so Levi's favorite or breakthrough performance of 2024 is
David Johnson as Andy in Alien Romulus. We did talk about this movie, I think, in the past a little bit, and I talked about this already, but David Johnson as Andy being the android in the movie. Really great performance. I mean, because we've seen a lot of android performances in the Alien franchise. And by the way, not to be a big apologist for this movie, because it was fine. It wasn't anything that groundbreaking. In fact, if you're going to do one of two things, I'd say go play Alien Isolation, the video game, if you had to pick, Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just thought that I was really impressed by the movie in general, but also him specifically and his performance, which was, like I was in the middle of saying, was more of a childlike version of an android, but also hinging on the menace in the last half of the movie, but just a different version of that, because you've seen a lot of those, and I mean, usually they're like played as people who aren't exactly human. And obviously obviously they're not, but like this one didn't play it like that so much as somebody who, and I mean this in obviously a respectful sense, of somebody that was almost like autistic or like verging on that, and that felt like that was more of what the role was, and kind of not that it's saying, and this is a dangerous thing as we know, is not that it's trying to compare people with autism to people who are literally not human as far as like androids necessarily, but trying to use that, I guess, more as a social critique on the way that people are treated in that way. And maybe I'm reading too much into that.
No, I think that's all there in the text.
I feel like I felt like that actually was a really respectful and interesting performance.
Well, do you think it was a great like swerve or variation after the Fassbender David which has become kind of iconic already in a few years, especially within the Alien fan community. In terms
even
of,
more so than like Lance Henriksen's in Aliens or Ashes in its own way. It's like the one that it was like very definitively, I know definitively that I am a robot, and everybody knows that I am. And of course, everybody knew that in Aliens too with Lance Henriksen's character, but it just felt more obviously so.
Because it's not really been... Has it been played for a twist ever since the original one? I feel like for the most part they've been pretty open about this is an android. Right. The first one it's a twist, obviously, but
I heard somebody... I watched that documentary Memory about the making of Alien, or kind of the influences for it, and I won't say much on that other than that there was a female critic in that I can't remember her name, but it was kind of towards the latter half of the documentary, talking about the character of Ash in that movie, and saying that most of the movie you just think, wow, he's just such an a-hole. Why is he such a jerk?
Yeah, right.
And you're just like, he's so weird. And then finding out he's a robot doesn't confirm that so much as it literally says, wait, somebody programmed him to be like that.
Yeah.
And that's like a whole other like aspect to that movie I've never thought about, is that somebody programmed him to act that way.
Where it's all about, we got to do this thing,
Right.
we got to do the mission,
Right.
we don't care about ultimately your own
Right.
safety.
And
It's-
even the way he treats women and the way that he makes jokes about things are very, like, disgusting, and that, like, adds to the movie in a big way of, like, wow, actually somebody really made him to act like that, and it's just something to think about. So thinking about that in terms of this, it's a similar thing kind of with this character in this movie about, wow, somebody made him to act kind of like a child almost, or, you know, somebody who's dependent on the main character in the movie, you know, that was played by, the girl that was in, played by Kaylee Spaney, who was in Civil War and also was in Priscilla, apparently, which I didn't see. But anyway, so yeah, I just thought he was really good, something kind of different.
So those are our breakout performances of the year. Next up, speaking of performances better than the movie they're in. And my award for this goes to, and I want to get this character name exactly right, John Cena as Rockhard Ron Rimstead in Ricky Stenicki, which I know this is not a movie Levi saw.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
So this is the latest movie from Peter Farrelly, who of course is with his brother made some of the biggest, you know, comedies of the 90s. Of course, Dumb and Dumber, who we've podcasted about before. There's Something About Mary, which is one of my new favorite movies I've seen over the last so many years. Ricky Stenicki is hardly on the level of those movies in terms of just their caliber. Look here, Levi, by the way, screenplay by and story by credits. This is, to me, the heart of the problem. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screenplay buys. That's just a crime. And 2 story buys. And by the way, they're like all the story buys and the screenplay buys are different people, so it doesn't even overlap.
Yeah.
The movie itself was very overstuffed. Just real quick, just say what it's about. The story centers on a group of friends who create a fake persona named Ricky Stenicki as a scapegoat for their shenanigans and are eventually forced to hire an actor to pose as Ricky when their families question his existence, which I think is honestly a great idea for a premise. The single biggest problem with the movie is they had too many of the friends.
Yeah.
Like there's like 3 of them. It's Zac Efron, Andrew Santino, and Jermaine Fowler. They're like the 3 friends who, again, they make up all the time about, oh, we gotta go see our buddy Ricky. Like he's sick, he's in the hospital, and they use that to just go golfing and take vacations, and like that's this thing. And I don't even remember exactly all the circumstances, but they get called out by like, we've never met Ricky. Where is he? Like we should meet him. And they're like, oh God, what are we gonna do? So they meet. Again, I want to get the character's name right. Rockhard Ron Rimstead, who's played by John Cena in the movie, who basically he's this like stage show performer who is obviously not all that great, down on his luck, and they meet him and go, hey, would you pose as Ricky Stenicki so we can like keep this going?
Yeah.
And he comes and he gives this performance of a lifetime as Ricky, and he like uses it for him to, in his mind, create the greatest character he's ever played. And honestly, I think all this sounds like such a funny, great premise. And John Cena is really funny in the movie. I think if anything, this is proof that, because you know his film career started to try to take shape more and more as he stepped away from pro wrestling, but I think
he is going to compete in the Elimination Chamber.
Because the whole thing, you know, obviously The Rock has tried to position himself more as an action star. Yeah. And certainly John Cena's been in some action movies as well, like The Marine, going way, way back to his original run in WWE.
Robert Patrick is the villain, yeah.
But, like, John Cena, like, he's not quite ever I mean, I think his best comedy movie he's been in was Trainwreck, and he was barely in that towards the beginning. What about
Fred the movie? Or you
I'm not as familiar with that. So
he played his imagination of his father.
Yeah.
What he imagined his father to be like.
Yeah.
It was pretty wild, I gotta say. That movie's actually randomly, now, this is years ago, but even for somebody who was relatively sane at that time, like, you know, who had a lot of taste in movies, even at the time, I was like, this is actually kind of not that bad, that movie. But anyway.
Yeah. So, I feel like
the Taxi Driver of children's movies in a lot of ways.
But like with Trainwreck and this, I would say like John Cena, what he should really pursue or try to find his way into are mainstream comedies, like to be kind of more of a comedic actor because he's really funny. And I think he's really funny in this movie. I wish the movie was honestly more about him than it was even these friends. And so he's really great in it, and I wish the movie around him was better. Like I said, I think the movie had the ingredients to be pretty strong, but it just doesn't quite get there. I think the single worst genre that exists in modern movies is probably the mainstream comedy.
Yeah.
It's just really a dead zone right now in terms of what can get made, and it's really sad because that's, to me, one of the most fulfilling genres and everything goes right. But, so like, I think if you're trying to do that right now, you're not going to be well served by the filmmakers or the writers that's active right now. But anyways, I really loved him in the movie. There's a scene where I think I showed you this. I think I might have sent it to you of him. Performing these songs,
doing
and they're all
you
related,
must whip it,
all related to ejaculation puns.
Right.
So, anyways, I hope the best for John Cena both now and in WrestleMania season as we approach that. But
I don't. But whatever.
Anyways, all right, Levi.
So mine.
Hold on a second.
For this
is your performance better than the movie? Let's open that envelope.
And we talked quite a bit. You got it that one time.
I know, that one time.
We talked quite a bit about this before, but Josh Hartnett in Trap, as what was the character's name? Cooper Abbott. Yeah. Now, we already talked about this quite a bit, and I don't want to act like Trap isn't a good movie, because it actually is.
It is a good movie.
But the movie
it's much better than Ricky Stenicki.
Yes, but so I don't want to say that exactly. But he makes the movie what it is. If he wouldn't be good, the movie wouldn't be good at all.
Yes.
I mean, and Josh Hartnett's one of them people that kind of had a comeback already with Oppenheimer. I mean, what are you doing? And this, but I felt like this was even more like, wow, like, this is a really great performance. Like, he's always been that heartthrob kind of actor, so to see him a little older and do something way more menacing and using that persona of somebody who can basically just be the white guy, the handsome, middle-aged white guy that everybody's like, oh, he's just this kind of goofy dad. Who cares? But actually, he's a serial killer, by the way, who you're looking for the whole time. Like, I felt like that he was somebody you could do that with pretty well. And so I don't really have a whole lot to say about that one because we've already talked about it, but I thought he was really great in that. And that was pretty good overall for M. Night Shyamalan as well of a movie.
I would agree. And I think, like you said, like, if the movie is good, but if he would not have been that lead role in the movie, I mean, it seemed like it was really tailor-made for him.
Yeah.
Then it would have been even more of a problematic movie, I would say. So, I think that's a great choice. I was just wondering if an M. Night Shyamalan movie is set to come out this year. And there's a few things that are untitled, blah, 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 so might be, but as of now, there's nothing officially confirmed. So, those are both two good choices. Next up, we have movie that surprised you the most in 2024. Levi, I'll let you go first here. Movie that surprised you the most goes to... I think I figured out how to do this now.
Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. We talked about this one as well. I don't want to belabor it, and I haven't seen it again since then. So we've been meaning to do that. Yeah. Hint, hint. The next overlapping dialogue will be a commentary
Episode
of that.
101?
Go ahead and say whenever that is. But just the fact the movie was good. I mean, frankly, with Wes Ball doing the movie, I was kind of like, oh.
Every time I hear his name, I think of Hello, Wes Mantooth from Anchorman.
Well, I think of like Paul W.S. Anderson, Alan Ball. Paul W.S. Alan Ball, Wes Ball. Or Uwe Boll, even.
Every once in a while, I hear people say the best Paul Anderson in Hollywood. I'm like, sit down and shut up. Like, we're not even.
That's the
joke
nicer
about this.
thing that could be said between us, because I would be. I probably wouldn't even be talking to him. I'd be doing something to him. Is all I'm saying.
And even some people do is, oh no, I'm kidding. It's like, no, just stop.
It's not funny.
There's no kidding going
Shut
on
your
here.
mouth.
Like, yeah.
Meanwhile, he's coming out with the Wastelands or the
I can't wait to never watch it.
whatever. You remember that Dave Bautista movie that he's
Oh,
making? What I'm
right.
talking about?
Yeah, okay.
It's like the Lost Lands, or it's like
The Lost Time. That'd be what I'd call it.
the Lost 2 hours. Yeah, that. Yeah, I mean, it's literally like Fury Road, but bad.
But
So,
no good.
Yeah, like looking in a mirror, only not. But anyway, so I didn't have a whole lot of faith in this West Ball after how great the last so many movies were under Matt Reeves. But it was just really good, and not a whole lot to say about it over that. Other than that, just surprised me, and I was like, oh, okay.
I personally liked that it didn't go for what is the nature of man and ape in the same way that the most recent trilogy did. It was just a little bit more of a straightforward adventure movie. I personally like that a little. Not necessarily better, because those movies are really well made and good, as we've talked about, but I quite like that.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that eventually, talking about it more in depth. My pick, and we talked about this on the pod, I think back after it had come out, is Jerry Seinfeld's Unfrosted. We did talk about it. I think,
we did.
Right? Yeah.
Which saw this in the Outer Banks.
And let me just,
in the OBX.
Yeah. Let me just say, the fact that this movie was, that was fine. It was an overperformance of all the expectations that we went into it with.
Well, because most people hated it. I mean, they talked about how bad it was.
I mean, I
don't
know how many, and we don't really like the Razzies, obviously, but like, I think it got all these Razzie nominations, and and again, it's flawed. But like, when I talk about, what if we had more comedies that had this more ZAZ vibe to it, and that definitely has, I think, what is, that whole thing.
Zucker, by the way, is what you're referring to. Made Airplane, and, Jane Austen's Mafia, that whole thing. The greatest title of all time. I'm sorry, I always have to bring it up. But
it probably is, yeah. Again, just, okay, yeah, sure, it's stupid, but it's fine, it's fun. Why do we need to expect a lot out of the friggin' Pop-Tart movie? You know what I mean?
No.
So again, I think we would
He's
agree.
not a good fella. He's a bad fella. I know that's from B-movie,
but there's also, I think there's a lot of people that wanted to use Jerry Seinfeld as the piñata when it was coming out for a variety of reasons. One of which has to do with his support of Israel and the Israel-Hamas situation. It's obviously, thankfully now, at least temporarily, as we know, resolved itself.
For like 5 minutes.
Yeah, we don't need to get into all that. But I think that combined with, and it's kind of funny that Jerry Seinfeld is now this pseudo lightning rod, because his comedy is the most like safe, like non-risk worthy thing. I mean, obviously Seinfeld as a sitcom was risk taking, but like his actual comedy in of itself is very, and I say this with love, like not confrontational or not edgy in the least.
I mean, it's observational comedy.
Yeah, so obviously, I don't think Unfrosted. I think it just came out at a specific time where there were people wanted to be
pissed off.
Yeah, and so the fact that, again, we're hardly claiming this is a masterpiece or anything, but just like, it was
the
fine.
fact that it was even anything though is a win. So,
but it had a few jokes and moments that were pretty funny. Pretty good.
The point where it became where Hugh Grant was like the wearing the bison helmet like January 6th was something I wasn't expecting. That wasn't really on my list of expectations for the year, I gotta say. So
also just tons of the cast was pretty big, had a lot of big names. So anyways, Unfrosted, not great, but okay, it's fine. Move on with it.
This next one.
Next up, best candidate for a future double feature episode of Overlapping Dialogue goes to
The Substance and Love Lies Bleeding,
which we agreed on this one. And I feel like we had made this observation earlier in the year, and I'd seen it and made in the year, and then Levi was like, what about these two? And we're like, that's definitely what it's got to be. Both of these.
We did talk about horror, Love Lies Bleeding. We never talked about The Substance.
Body horror comedy thrillers. I don't think Love Lies Bleeding is as much of a comedy as almost as, or a satire in the same way exactly that.
I was going to say, actually, I think it is. It's not as much of a satire,
Ed Harris's
but it is funny.
Far,
well, no, there's quite a few things in that movie that are inherently funny, but
sure.
yeah.
And
it's not like a satire like the
I don't know if we
Substance
really
is.
talked about The Substance at all
You
here, did
are
we?
one.
That's a movie that I quite liked when I saw it. I liked it pretty good. But that's a movie that honestly has moved up in my estimation as I think about it more and more. Obviously, Demi Moore's performance in it has, definitely gotten a lot of traction, and she's very likely actually going to win an Academy Award for Best Actress for that. I was actually shocked that she had never, as long as she'd been in Hollywood, never really been up for an Academy Award in a serious way. So, and this movie is about like an aging actress specifically, so it very much fits into,
it's
something
weird.
that's award worthy.
It's funny that you put it that way because it really is kind of a Sunset Boulevard for a new generation in a lot of ways. As far as like the Norma Desmond is now taking extreme Botox, basically, or
especially in the era of Ozempic and these like weight loss drugs / thinning yourself, like things that are various medications that are going on.
But now I'll remake your entire self. Like.
So, and then Margaret Qualley, of course, plays her like. When what I found was interesting, it was like they kind of become two different things, and then they're like competing with each other, and they're not exactly one being anymore.
Yeah.
And of course, Love Lies Bleeding, a comedy thriller, crime thriller that came out earlier in the year. We quite like that a lot, I know, and that would probably, I don't know if it'd make my top 10, but it would be definitely in the top like 15. It probably would make a top 10 for me, but anything to remember about that movie? I know directed by Rose Glass. And of course, had Kirsten Stewart and Katie O'Brien kind of in a breakthrough performance. She would also be.
I liked this movie, Love Lies Bleeding, a little better than The Substance. Personally, I think Substance is probably better, but
going to be in the new Running Man, actually, the Edgar Wright Running Man movie that's coming out this year.
But I really like Love Lies Bleeding. I mean, it was kind of like a lot of these other movies that have been made the last so many years as far as like crime movies go, but with like some weirder touches. And we talk about Ed Harris. He kind of plays sort of even a version of the Dennis Quaid in The Substance. I mean, very different, but kind of So by the way, I love Dennis
Quaid. Feminine
in
body horror movies.
Dennis Quaid in The Substance, the that like outfit he has at the end, looking all like Tommy Lee Jones, Two-Face or something like. I just think that both movies
have shocking
are
endings in their own way.
Yes. Well, that's what I was going to say is the one of the funniest things. Sorry, I actually just farted. So in case you couldn't hear it, I went ahead and told you. Sorry about that. Anyway, I think it's appropriate that I said that right before I talk about this, though. Is Wikipedia here. I want to read what it says. Without stabilizer fluid, Sue's body begins to rapidly deteriorate. In a panic, she attempts to create a new version of herself using the leftover activator serum despite the single-use warning. This results in the creation of a grotesque mutated body, Monstro Eliza Sue, with both Elizabeth and Sue's faces. When, there's parts in the movie where it's like the Demi Moore character's name, then the I have it here, I can look, and then the Margaret Qualley character name. Yeah, it's Sue and Elizabeth. Yeah, and that it shows both their names at different times, and then it on the screen, and then towards the end when the Monstro Eliza Sue happens, it literally says Monstro Eliza Sue on the. I literally busted out laughing. I was like, that's probably the funniest thing I've seen in a movie this year. Is just that it took it that seriously.
Right.
And I always do love a movie like this, which has a very complex tone. And then at the end just says, the hell with it, let's go on a rampage. Like, I always do love a movie that does that. And also the fact that it, like, put a mask over its face and walked in, and everybody's like, oh, yeah, that's normal. Like, they couldn't tell anything was weird. And then when she took it off, it was like, oh, my God. And then the whole moment where she literally basically combusts and starts spraying blood all over the place, and the music and the blood spraying, that's really hilarious. So anyway, just movies that are both, about the, I said female body horror movies and just with these very weird sensibilities, and they're very different, but I feel like both these movies fit for like I said, a double feature is very interesting. So,
I agree. So I think that makes for a good double feature there. So up next, and last year, let me just say, we did the best use of Tilda Swinton in 2023. We think that every other year we might vary it up with between Tilda Swinton and our new person we're honoring, Willem Dafoe. So obviously, Tilda Swinton and Willem Dafoe were both in like,
and she was in the
half
Almodovar
dozen
movie
movies a
this
year,
year, but we
seems
didn't see it. So,
yeah, so we didn't see it this year. So the best use of Willem Dafoe in 2024 goes to Beetlejuice for his performance as Wolf
Keep it real.
Jackson. Did we?
Yeah, we talked
about Beetlejuice back when it came out.
Did you keep it real, Kyle?
I tried to.
Let's
I think
get real.
One of the more pleasant surprises, and similar to, well, I'd say in a better quality than Unfrosted, but like the fact that it was just good.
Yeah.
The fact that Beetlejuice was just good felt like
and that
a
was
massive
my
win.
one movie on my top 10 that wasn't 4.5 or 5. It was 4. But I just had to give that a pretty big bump just by nature of that it was, because everybody knows I'm a massive Beetlejuice fan, and so if I'm pleased, then I don't know. I feel like that says something about the movie.
So just some other ones real quick. He was in 4 movies in 2024. We saw all of these. Kinds of Kindness, where, of course, that was an anthology movie. We talked about that on the pod. I remember 3 different roles he played.
Yeah.
Beetlejuice, of course, as Wolf Jackson. Saturday Night, as we mentioned, he was David Tebbutt. And Nosferatu, he was also in, as Professor Alban Eberhard von Franz, which is basically the Van Helsing.
And he's seen things that would make Sir Isaac Newton crawl back into his mother's womb.
Yeah.
So, and there's nothing really, and we didn't really talk about Nosferatu I don't think, at any point, which was fine.
I liked that. I liked it better than Levi did, but I definitely concede that it's, it was
once again another awesome opening.
Yeah,
and then it kind of just like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great experience seeing it at the BFI IMAX in London when I was over there, so I'll always remember that and love that about it. But the movie itself, pretty good. I will say I do love anytime I'm in a movie theater where I kind of got to crane my neck slightly to go up or down because it's like the
never
screen
forget
is
I had
so
to
big.
do that with Phantom Thread because I got too close to the screen, and that was not really a movie you need to have to do that with exactly. So I was kind of like had like this the whole time. Like, my head. But as far as Kinds of Kindness go, also we really loved that and thought he was great in that. So go back and listen about that, and that's one of my favorite movies.
I don't know. I think Jesse Plemons gave the performance of that whole movie.
He won a award for that at the Cannes Film Festival for it too. I think.
Yeah, I think so. So
no, because he played like 3
Stone's
different
also
roles.
great, of
so
course. But anyways, Wolf Jackson. What I loved about him in Beetlejuice is that he was kind of a side character, but he was basically like this action star from Earth who died in some accident making the movie, I think it was, right?
He did his own stunts,
So he's like now a detective and thinks of himself as a detective
Let's
in the
keep it real.
In the underworld.
You gotta keep it real. You've got to.
You have to do it.
Yeah.
So anyways,
but he had some great line readings in it too.
Yeah.
And great moments. I love that moment where he gets frozen.
Yeah.
And he's like
that,
and it's just standing there. That whole movie's really
but
great.
He seems like,
good,
we've only got 2 Beetlejuice movies now, but of course, Willem Dafoe should be in the oeuvre of Beetlejuice, the whole world of Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
So
we talked about that movie a lot, but just to remind us of what my favorite line reading in that movie is when Burn Gorman is trying to run away, and Beetlejuice appears in the door, and he's like, "Where are you going, Padre?"
Yeah. He was like weird as always.
Oh Burn Gorman. Basically Burn Gorman, fine weirdo. We got him. So yeah. But
anyways, a lot of high quality stuff from Willem Dafoe as always, but we wanted to single him out as Wolf Jackson in Beetlejuice. All right, so this next one's a new one, all new one. The best Cracker Barrel performance of the year. Now, let me just say,
I'm just laughing thinking about this now.
Inspired by a New York Times profile that was done earlier this year of Glenn Powell, who we both like quite a bit. Glenn Powell, that was talking about him in Twisters. So that was what it was like.
And can I talk about that real quick before you do that? Like saying he went full Cracker Barrel. When I think full Cracker Barrel, I'm thinking like what we're going to talk about.
Right.
Not like, okay, so yeah, he wore cowboy boots and a hat and jeans, and now he's a
Well, you can tell it's
Cracker
like,
Barrel.
this is something the red states will like.
Right.
Yeah,
it's like,
was the implication of
but
like
that's
was.
Not what that
Yeah,
is,
I agree.
though. And
I
I'm kind of like, that's just a really, that's some New York idiot's version of
I agree.
saying, oh, he did a little more of a down-to-earth guy. Oh, that's Cracker Barrel. It's like, that's kind of really dumb,
It's
actually.
condescending, too.
So instead, let's be condescending to someone else. The Cracker Barrel performance of the year.
So the best Cracker Barrel performance of the year goes to
Kevin Bacon as John Labatt in Maxine.
which we talked
He
about.
was
that
a
movie.
lost ball in the high weeds today.
So
okay.
he was basically a private investigator from the South.
Basically.
I mean that's what he.
That's what I'm saying, though. Yeah, it's like basically he is. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
No, I mean, he's very much, so he's like from Louisiana, and he's doing this performance. And I mean, he's literally basically doing exaggerated version of his JFK performance, more or less.
Yes.
And he's like, man, your daddy's looking for you. Your pappy wants his daughter back. Like, basically, you know. This guy is paid a lot of money to find Maxine. I ate some cornbread this morning. It was so good.
I think the best thing I can say about the performance
know.
is Kevin Bacon knows exactly what kind of movie he's in.
Yeah.
Is I'm sure being directed to be
Because
obviously
few
what he
people
is,
actually
like,
know what kind of movie they're in, and he does. So
yeah. Again, as it says here, John
we talked about
Labatt,
this movie, I
private
think, back at the
investigator.
time, but
I was just curious about his Wikipedia.
Now that is a
picture
Cracker
is
Barrel
not
picture.
A good picture.
Where's he from?
Philadelphia, it says.
It's funny because we were on our way to Pennsylvania at the time when we saw it, because we saw it at the Alamo in Winchester, Virginia. But
Maxine and the
it's-
Ty West like trilogy is very much it feels like, and you wrote about this I think in a really good way, is basically an Alamo Drafthouse product. It almost feels like. So it's,
and
it felt like
X,
the perfect
X and
place to
Pearl
see it.
are really good.
Yeah, we like those
Maxine,
quite a bit. That's
not
the weakest.
so much.
That's
It's
the weakest
okay,
of the three.
but yeah, it was very much like, oh, let's do another one. Okay, and
and also
I really
had
thought
a
a lot about the ending of that movie.
Yeah.
I think about a lot actually, and I think it's really good. But
I think we would agree. I thought it had a really dumb connection to, especially the
well,
first movie.
I literally leaned over to you and just said, and I've spoiled all this, by the way. Sorry,
Yeah.
I guess. If Daddy, Pappy looking for you, girl.
Yeah.
You know, but the dad. I literally leaned over and said, the dad's gonna be the killer.
And I
And it
remember
literally
thinking, like,
was,
what?
like, yeah.
That don't make any sense. And then it does, and I still say, that don't make any sense.
Right,
But,
yeah.
I mean, you did call that, so I'll give you credit for that.
Pappy, it sat me down. I drank some cornbread and milk. He said, time to go get daughter back now.
Now, don't you want to see, like, a spin-off now,
Other
a
than the fact
prequel
oh, wow, that
of
death,
the John
by the
Labatt
way.
character?
I gotta say, that death was something else. He literally got crushed in a car,
Yeah.
like one of those car junkers at the, like, junkyard or whatever.
Yeah.
And literally he was like, no, stop it, and, like, got crushed to death.
But now, don't you want to see
Yeah,
a
oh,
spin-off
definitely,
prequel about him and, like, maybe Cormac McCarthy's even? I know because he spent some years in Louisiana, New Orleans, as he was writing, I think, the early versions of his last books that came out set in New Orleans. And, like, Cormac McCarthy's just a character in this
and
world,
then,
too.
like, you have Gator in him a little bit from White Lightning.
Yeah.
Like,
Now-
buy your dress competing. Buy your dress competing.
Should we define what is Cracker Barrel?
an
performance
actual
like?
redneck performance?
An actual redneck
Yes.
Southern
or
performance, like-
yeah, because that I don't think that's accurate to say that about.
So we're reclaiming Cracker
no.
Barrel from the,
Thanks a lot
the
for
elites of the New York Times.
Thanks a lot for coming up with it, but now we're going to take it and do the right thing. Like pretty much all New York art, we're going to actually make it, let's keep
Well, didn't
it
you feel
real.
like, and I think that profile overall was good, I'll say
Yeah.
that. But, like, that was, like, a really quick, smug way of,
He goes full
like,
Cracker Barrel.
defining southernness
Yeah.
or more rural America, basically, like, and, you know.
I'll tell you what. Now, I can tell you that Cracker Barrel is not what real Southern food is. But, you know, the real way to do that is, the Cracker Barrel performance, a la the New York opinion. You know. But anyway. So, yeah, that was the Cracker Barrel performance. I'm already in love with it. Because I remember when we talked about it, you were like, oh, we should come up with that, because that should be that.
Yeah, I remember reading
yes.
that in the profile.
Yeah.
Like, we need to save that for... And so now it will be forever immortalized.
I'm a lost ball in the high weeds today. By the way, that scene where he like literally shows up at the psycho house.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm looking for you. And he's like literally going to kill her basically on the Universal lot. And it's just like, what? Like, yeah. Anyway, there's some wild times going on there.
Yeah, so up next is the best One Love. The best One Love goes to... Levi, you want to do the honors? Best One Love
is One Love.
Bob Marley.
Marley, One Love. There's a war going on.
So
wait. Peace.
Peace. We talked about this back when it came out.
This is gonna be the quickest one, by the way. Like the music's already playing.
Yeah, this is honestly a joke. Where it's like, what's the best? What's the one way we could say something about One Love? This movie is the definition of come and gone. Been totally forgotten about. Like this movie will have zero legacy whatsoever.
But there was a war going on
because obviously and I'm sure we're not huge Bob Marley people, but like wouldn't you agree that it's like somebody that has his reputation and then this movie's just come and gone and no one talks about it whatsoever? It does feel like, it's a shame that Bob Marley maybe didn't get a more, eminently talked about movie, and there was also that Amy Winehouse movie that came out this year, too, which got like downright awful reviews. I know, and I remember like looking at it going, this looks like trash. And I think like there was a whole thing about her estate and Back to Black was the name of that.
Black, as the trailer said. It had that Rory Scovel in it, didn't it? What was his name? Go Down. No, Eddie Marson. That's his name. Yeah. I was trying to think. That was in The World's End.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to think what his name was. So it had like him in it randomly. It was just whatever. I'm assuming.
Anyways, Bob Marley, One Love. Because, again, obviously, if we're talking about concert movies, or not concert movies, but, like, music biopics, this, of course, like, fits into that mold. We would agree that A Complete Unknown, like, didn't break the mold with that, but was a really good version of the music biopic, with Bob Dylan, and Chalamet did great in it, as we said. Bob Marley, One Love really just did feel like, we got to make a Bob Marley movie. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
And, again, it didn't feel like, I'm hardly a Bob Marley fan in a big way, but like it just didn't feel like it was all that considered or important or interesting in any way about Bob Marley. But nonetheless, it was awarded with a Harry Dean Award.
Of Best One Love. Don't worry, we'll probably have another Best One Love someday.
Very likely we will.
I mean,
who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. We don't want to make any promises.
So when's Bob Marley going to put some new music out? It's been a little while, ain't it?
Yeah, that's been a little while.
I'm just wondering.
So anything else to say about One Love,
No.
Levi? Up next, Best Blockbuster, which is, I think, pretty self-explanatory. Best Blockbuster of 2024 is... I'll let Levi do the
Is One Love. Oh, no, never mind. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Dune Part 2. I haven't seen this since it came out, and everybody knows what a big fan I was of Dune, the first part. So I've been wanting to rewatch this.
Not the Lynch part.
No. And I've been wanting to rewatch this, and some people will be shocked and be like, what, you haven't rewatched it? No, I haven't. I have it on 4K, but I ain't got around to it again.
Mm-hmm.
I just really thought this was really pretty great. And I thought, in particular, that Zendaya was really good in it. Because she was just barely in the first one. But I think she played a really good version of Chani that was even better than the book and actually gave her a lot more agency. And I really liked Austin Butler in the movie, too. I thought he was really good. So I liked all the additions that it had to it. I thought were really good, and it was a good part 2 to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, a lot of memes were made out of it, of like, he is Le Sangalib, like, you know, and every time somebody's like, he's only he is trying to test us, like, that as a whole meme I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, no, I thought it was really good. I just haven't rewatched it, but I feel like also at the same time that speaks to how good it really was, that it's like, yeah, that was the only movie that was a blockbuster that was even possible.
Yeah,
to be
it was kind of a down year, I would say, overall for blockbusters. And again, Levi likes Dune even more than I do, but I definitely think these movies represent a good baseline standard of what a blockbuster can look and feel and sound like in 2024, while also like working on promoting new stars, obviously in the form of Chalamet and Zendaya, even Florence Pugh as well. Just some of our younger actors. Austin Butler also gave, I think, a really great little villain performance in that. So there is like more Dune in development. Dune Messiah. What's your temperature for that in terms of interest or
everybody
expectations?
Keeps thinking that's going to happen, and it ain't.
Wouldn't you personally agree that, like, I think we got a really mini miracle in the fact that both these Dune movies were as good as they are, and deep down I'm like, all right, that was great, but come on, Denis Villeneuve, can we go and do something new or different? Back to that again.
And also, it just comes down to the fact that it's like, that second book was not as good, so who cares?
Dune Messiah,
I don't know. I've read that one, so I don't know. It just seems kind of like a waste of time, and it's not going to make money, so I don't know why people are expecting that it's going to, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So, best blockbuster.
And let me just say now, before we move on, is that I've said this before, I want to be on the record officially. Because it did, and I've said, you can speak to this, I've said this before, and I might have said it even before now on this podcast, but I don't think so, that Jason Momoa is officially coming back as Duncan Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
There will be, I guarantee you.
Okay.
This is my prediction.
Uh-huh.
I've been saying this for a while. There will be, because he died, obviously in the first one, he's coming back as a Gola in this one, which is, for those who don't know, the Bene Talelax in the second book have this ability to create clones of organic matter.
Okay.
So basically, if you can get even a little bit of DNA of a dead person, you can create a clone of them. That isn't really human, though, obviously. They're synthetic, and they don't really act like a human being. But they can possess the memories of that person. And so they attempt, basically, the Bene Talelax to give this version of Duncan Idaho to the Gola of him, to Paul, as a way to confuse him, so that then they can work to get rid of him, because they, along with the Spacing Guild people, are wanting more control over the space travel again, which he's pretty much limited. And so that's their way of doing that. So he's going to play that role again, and I guarantee you he's going to be like, that was just such a hard role to play. It really took a lot out of me to be evil in a movie, to play the evil version of Duncan Idaho, a character that so many people love and are such fans of.
So write that down.
So just saying, you will see that happen. If that movie happens, you will see that on the press tour. I bet everything on it. Whatever everything means.
Yeah. All right, so next up, and this is a movie we have not formally talked about really on the pod yet, is Best Movie to Feature an Intermission.
You probably know what the movie is already.
Goes to The Brutalist, of course.
And don't worry, we're not going to talk for 3.5 hours about the movie.
No, this whole podcast might end up being 3.5 hours, but the movie, yeah. So The Brutalist, this is, of course... about, this architect, a Hungarian Jewish Holocaust survivor who immigrates to the United States, where he struggles to achieve the American dream until a wealthy client changes his life. Stars Adrian Brody, Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce, and has some others as well. Alessandra Navola's in it as well. This has been like one of the favorites of the film festivals this last year. It's up for a lot of Academy Awards. Kind of already had a stamp as, watch out, maybe the film of 2024. Where does The Brutalist for you, Levi, macro, micro, whatever, fit into the larger scope of 2024?
Okay.
Because it's a movie that we went into with big expectations.
Yes, and I think it's difficult with any movie, and I know you felt this with Call Me by Your Name years ago, which is almost 10 years old. Can you believe that?
And let me just say that was a little bit further after even when this would have been when I saw that. Anyways.
It's tough on movies sometimes when that happens, you know. And so I'm being I was very charitable towards this movie relatively because I knew that I was like I already had in my head a vision of what this is.
I think I'm going to put a link to what you wrote about this movie in the episode for the episode description so people can read it because you wrote about it and kind of about that nature of its perceived greatness versus what was great about it.
I don't know. I'm going to say it now so I can be clear, and I'll start with all the negatives first. I find Brady Corbet to be an incredibly pretentious person to listen to speak. Have you heard him talk much?
A little bit.
It seems like he knows that he's made a movie that is supposed to be The Godfather Part 2 or something. You know what I mean?
He's been getting a lot of comparisons with, especially with this movie, like Coppola and Paul Thomas Anderson and The Master has been talked about specifically.
And
reference
so
point for this.
He knows that about himself, and it gets very tiresome and cumbersome to listen to. But seeing the trailers for this movie, I was kind of totally blown away by it. I heard a little bit about it early on. I think it played at Venice, and which is funny because it's the very ending of the movie is set in Venice. It's almost like that was made just for that fact.
So they're we know what art is. This area is the mecca for art. All art comes to Venice. You know, self-congratulatory thing for those people.
But I'd heard about the movie a little bit, heard what it was about, and was like, oh yeah, okay, because I know you said there's this movie, The Brutalist, is coming out. A lot of people have been comparing it to The Godfather or other movie, blah blah blah. Like, oh yeah, cool, awesome. And I saw the trailer, and I was totally blown away by the trailer. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like everything I want in a movie, blah blah blah, And so a lot of hype was going into this movie, which mostly was kind of true.
And that can't help but feel deflating.
Yes.
Well, if something's promised is great, and you think it's pretty great or close to great, that's inherently, by the metrics of your expectations, a disappointment. Yeah. Whether or not the movie's actually still not great or not.
It's kind of like, and I like this movie better than I like Once Upon a Time in the West, but it's kind of a similar thing where it's like, you have all these other things that are great, and we're not even talking about in the filmography of Brady Corbet, but like, even as it is with Sergio Leone, but like, living up to the hype of, oh wow, like, or even Once Upon a Time in America, similar thing. It's like, this big, epic movie. And I've always said it's kind of impossible to make a movie that big and epic and not be great. And then it's like, well, there actually are a couple examples of movies that are just fine, And this is kind of one of them. As far as like, I think it's better than fine. I think it's a 4.5-star movie. But there was a certain amount of deflation that I felt while I was watching it. That I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty great.
And we're all for long movies. Do you think the length had anything to do with that?
No, I didn't care about that. Did you?
Well, in as much as it's a movie that's at once trying to be about everything, but also about these very narrow subject matter. And obviously the length of a thing is going to contribute to that sense of both over and under stuffness, if that makes any sense. So, like, in that way, I do think the length could be... But I will say I'm glad that this was not made into a miniseries or like a TV. It was made as a film first and foremost. I do think the movie was really successful, especially in terms of trying to depict this post-World War II Jewishness, this sense of what he is a Holocaust survivor, the Adrian Brody character, escaped, and this sense of him trying to start a life over in America, but he's also consumed by the literal and figurative ghosts of what he went through and how his own art as architecture is inspired by his time in concentration camps. I do like, this is an interesting counterpoint to something like Zone of Interest, which came out last year, which is, of course, was one of the most acclaimed movies of 2023. Of, like, this, like, this is all set after the Holocaust, so we really don't get any depictions of anything that happens.
The most we get of that is of the younger girl character that's like their niece, of her at the beginning and the end of the movie. It shows getting interrogated by some Soviets that had, I think, basically captured her fleeing or whatever, or either liberated or that she was traveling away. She was like, wandering and they caught her or something. That's like the most you see of anything like that. But
and I think too, like, the movie has a fascinating thing between like the waspy approximation or appropriation, I should say, of like wanting to be special and act like you're a patron of the arts, which is represented by Guy Pearce, who gives a really great performance, I feel like, and he's been. I
find our conversation very intellectually stimulating.
As a lot of people,
he finds other things stimulating too, as it turns out.
Harrison Lee Van Buren, which is the most like I Am Wasp name I can think of.
Well, but he's Dutch, I guess, because of Van Buren.
But like that idea of like I represent the moneyed excellence here in America, and I'm gonna coast off of your import and your genius, and like feel as though I'm a patron for you, and it really what I'm doing for you is more about me, and so like. That whole relationship they have that ends in, I don't know how much we want to spoil. It ends in a assault in a variety of ways of him towards
both literal and figurative, yeah.
And I think that whole push and pull of that relationship is interesting. I will say, like, I think the second half and the introduction of not only the Felicity Jones character but of the niece character, like. Adds a little, is trying to push in a little too much stuff.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Within this movie that I feel like it's trying to go for too many things, and I think that's like why.
Yeah,
it ultimately suffers.
I wanted to say that is that I do actually think the first half is better, and after that it kind of lost me a little bit. And let me be clear, it's not because that female characters are introduced in the movie. What you're saying is right, is that that's not the problem. The problem is that it tries to do that, and then it's trying to juggle everything. And it's like, it would have been nicer if this would have been either longer to encompass even more of that, or not had that as much. Mm-hmm. Or, I agree. I think the first half's better. And that's the stuff that's like 5-star caliber stuff. For the most part,
but I mean, this is the tough thing about when you split or bifurcate a story as clearly as because this literally, as we said, has an intermission, which I wish more longer movies did have, just because purely so I can go to the bathroom because I do love longer movies, I genuinely do, but also like I love something that gives me a chance to literally get up and walk around just for a second and use the bathroom. But anyways, but when you bifurcate it so much, it's easy, and I fall into this too. It's like, oh, this is better than that. The whole thing is conceived as a thing, as a singular thing. So that kind of sometimes makes it hard to judge art like this. Yeah. That's so bifurcated because it's all conceived of as one thing, and like this, when we cut it in half, is really more of an arbitrary marker of the story that is. The whole thing is and then there's I don't know how much we want to talk about the epilogue to the movie. That's been this huge talking point as well in terms of how quote unquote Zionist that is and how that relates to Israel.
Well, I kind of wrote
about
that too,
but all of that.
In my review, I wrote about that.
And so, anyways, I feel like this is we haven't got one of these in a while that I feel like quite qualifies as a flawed masterpiece, because I feel like that term is thrown around here and there more often than it really deserves. I feel like this is the definition of something that's a flawed masterpiece. Much like literally a piece of architecture that you feel like you get lost in, which I think one of my favorite things about the movie is that kind of right before the epilogue, that whole sequence where they're like going through in the dark. I feel like that's literally a metaphor for the movie itself, like trying to find your way in or out of this creation.
But there's aspects to the movie that feel that way, as far as like it feels big on purpose just to be big. Like the music feels big.
It's grasping.
And it's like going. It's like really these big swells, and the movie feels like it wants to be the big movie that it's not, kind of, or like not even that it isn't. It's like, yeah, you are that, but what else you got for me here a little bit, in parts.
Yeah.
But just to speak on that about going back to the intermission, about the intermission having that photograph of the wedding of theirs on the screen, and I just sat and kind of kept looking at it while the intermission was going on, and I don't know, it's like, here's the best way I can put the whole movie, is like Brady Corbet is attempting to get at my emotions through very shallow means in some ways, but he's still getting there.
Right.
So it's kind of like you can only be so mad at it because you're like, well, it's working. So
yeah, I agree.
You know, and it's like, well, he did it. I just wish it could have been a little better version of that. That would have been a little better, but you know.
I think we would agree. We're very grateful that a movie like this even tried to do what it's doing, because it feels like all the other great films of the year, movies that are competing to have that title, this definitely feels like it's the most on its own island of trying to do what it's doing. So
and we're gonna try to see it again when it comes to the Carolina Theater, maybe, and then I've already pre-ordered the Blu-ray. So it's a movie I'm gonna rewatch a ton throughout my life and really try to think about what I really feel about it.
I mean, I could very easily see us doing this as a double feature candidate with literally maybe even our next movie that we're going to talk about. So another category, which of course is probably only going to be a 2024 category, but we'll see. The second best film to feature architecture in 2024 is Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, which I believe we did talk about on the pod.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I think we did. Towards the end. You know, a movie that had been promised to us for so long finally got made, which we were very happy with. I feel like the critical reception of this movie was pretty mixed to bad, it seems like.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just, more than anything, I'm just like grateful this movie exists and is on the weird tightrope wire walk that it's doing.
Yeah.
It seems very strange, but I feel like some movies that it's like most in concert with, like in some ways, are the Star Wars prequels, which I know got mentioned. Of course, Lucas and Coppola are old friends and they're kind of dealing in the same language.
I mean, in terms of the way it looks.
Yeah, and like also some of the ideas of greatness and chosen one mentality also are actually kind of similar to Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. But again, this is who knows? We might not ever get another Coppola movie. This might be very well his last thing, and I'm so glad that he at least got the opportunity to make this. And also, like, it was a box office quote unquote bomb. Because it was made for 120 to 136 million and it only grossed 14.3 million. But I'm glad that he just said, you know what, I've got all my own money to do this. I'm going to do what I want to do, and he certainly did. So, Megalopolis.
Yeah.
Second best film to feature architecture in 2024.
Yeah, it was a movie that I just loved that it was like really like, let's just go and do this, and I'm going to do my own thing, and I don't care what. And so it didn't always have to be the best movie, because it was just like, it's just is what it is, and I like that about it, and I quite liked it in general. It has a random fan base around it, I know, especially people that laugh about the scene of
to go back to the club.
That of course, but of John Voight with the arrow under his pants, like, you want to see this boner I got? Like, and literally, like, what? Like, I remember we saw that when the Hurricane Helene had come through and the power was still out, so we were like, let's just go see that.
Oh, that's right.
And so we saw
my
that.
birthday weekend was officially when it came out.
So Megalopolis is a movie that is literally what it sounds like. It's all over the place, and just really kind of insane. So and I like that about it. So
absolutely.
So go back to the club.
And again, I really don't feel like I like it even in a guilty pleasure way. I feel like I'm genuinely glad
like
that it's like this weird creation of just slamming all these ideas together and seeing what sticks. You know?
And Dustin Hoffman, like, maybe being murdered, ? In one scene, but we're not really sure. And it's like, that feels like that should have been like a deleted scene, but it was just in the movie, so.
Absolutely. So.
I'm just glad that movie's out and it's done. That way we don't have to talk about it anymore. I bet as far as like, will it make money? No. Will it do that? No. Like, of course not. So let's just move on. Like,
Has that came out on a home video release yet?
I don't know. Probably not.
I'm not sure.
I don't know that it ever will. at this point. So
I'll
look it up while you're
Megalopolis.
doing it.
So our next category is disposable action movie we had the most fun with, and I know we talked about this on the pod back when it came out, is The Beekeeper.
Yeah.
Which, of course, was the latest Jason Statham movie. Not a lot to say about this. David Ayer directed this, so...
Thank God for David Ayer.
I feel like he'd kind of been in a wilderness, for me personally, for making movies.
I was kidding about
while.
that, by the way. That's a joke.
Yeah. His new movies, A Working Man, coming out in 2025, which also stars Jason Statham.
So it looks like there's some like British Blu-rays out there. I don't know if they're region free though.
Okay.
So for Megalopolis, by the way.
Okay. We'll definitely get that when that comes out. But The Beekeeper. I loved how this movie was kind of also a grand satire on politics of both the left and the right. Because the ultimate villain is kind of this facsimile version of Hillary Clinton, but then so much of the conspiracy involves these more right-wing problems or whatever. So it was a weird...
These Jeremy Irons characters.
Yeah, it's like this...
Jeremy Irons plays a villain!
Imagine that.
Yeah.
I just felt like it was just a beautifully idiotic mishmash of a lot of different things that ultimately is Jason Statham, he's for the people, and he's going to just kill whoever he's got to do.
The best thing in the movie was where he just, after he killed all the people, he just, went in the ocean and, got in a scuba diving outfit and just, went underwater and disappeared. You remember that? It was just well, that's it. I guess I'm going to leave. My favorite scene in the whole movie was where he literally tied that guy to a truck and then drove the truck off the bridge, and it, slammed into the water or whatever.
Yeah.
That was nice. So, yeah, not a whole lot to say about this movie. I kind of want to see a version of this that's coming out this year called The Amateur with Rami Malek, where he's oh, my wife died. I need to kill her. Kill him.
I killed her.
Rami Malek gets revenge on his wife's killers. And there's that great line where Holt McElhaney's you couldn't arm wrestle, or you couldn't beat a 90-year-old nun in an arm wrestling match. Literally makes the trailer is just hilarious. And then all the kills in the trailer that it shows are him being really weird as always. There's a lot of cracks in this pool, and the guy's whatever. It's not what I would do. By the way, I'd probably get out of the pool.
Yeah.
But he gives him a while to swim back the other way before he blows it up. So anyway. There's always one of these types of movies around this time of year, so this is where we were last year, was The Beekeeper, so.
It'll be about all we have to say about that.
Yeah.
Fun enough movie. Next up, new category, that was a new category too, but as was the second best movie to feature architecture in 2024. Well, who knows? Well, let's give 2025 time. Maybe that we got to have
for the best
minimum,
for 2024, though?
Well, for 2025,
but I was going to say that if it's literally the same thing as second best movie featuring architecture.
That's what I'm saying. All we need is at least 2 architecture movies to technically qualify
for 2024.
For 2025.
No, but I'm saying if you keep the name exactly the same.
No, it can't be the same.
I know, I'm making a joke, but yeah.
So, but who knows? Maybe. I have no idea what that was. Anyways, I don't know how I had it figured out last year, and this year it's not.
Well, it's because they've updated the app and now it sucks.
I think that probably is why. Next up, though. And I think this needs to be a permanent category because this can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Eye roll of the year, eye roll of 2024 goes to Here.
Robert Zemeckis' film.
Which we have not talked about this.
Here.
Echoing the source material, which is actually a 2014 graphic novel, which Zemeckis co-wrote the screenplay with Eric Roth, who's actually one of our great screenwriters. The film is told in a non-linear fashion. The story covers the events of a single plot of land and its inhabitants spanning over the distant past to the 21st century. During the film, the screen is often subdivided into multiple panes, presenting events from different time periods simultaneously.
What's funny is I had just finished or was still reading Northwoods.
Yeah, that's what I was talking
about. When this movie came out.
This feels like a weird thing that's in concert with it, and I know this story goes back a little further as far as the graphic novel does. We've talked about Zemeckis a little bit before here and there. I know Levi's a little more of a Zemeckis skeptic than I am,
This
and he's
didn't help.
certainly,
Yeah.
I think, one of like I don't know, straight. He's definitely like his filmmaking is one that has been really since his career began. He's been one of the most talked about important filmmakers of his whole time. Obviously, most of his movies are these very popular, big commercial enterprises.
Yeah.
This movie, for what it's worth, had a budget of $45 to $50 million, grossed $15.8 million, so it did not do well financially.
Another thing, I like the band Yes, but it had that song in the trailer is like, no. That's really bad.
I actually am weirdly fascinated by this movie. I do think it is going to be this random weird cultural artifact that is already I've seen be passed around as here's the movie though. Like there's already there's already a fandom sprouting out around this movie, which I think is fascinating.
It's like downsizing.
But I mean, this movie's not. I mean, we would agree this movie's not bad.
No,
but it's not quite good either. I don't know what it is. It's like what do you because you kind of came up with I think this category maybe and this movie being awarded this category. What's your thoughts on calling here the eye roll movie of the year?
Well, obviously Robert Zemeckis is the eye roll director of all time.
Certainly the last 50 years.
And and because an eye roll can mean a lot of things.
Because let me just say my gut instinct when I hear eye roll is ugh. Look at this crap. Like I can't believe they did this.
Well,
like,
it can be that.
Yeah.
But also it can be I guess so.
Which I think's more where you're
coming
from with
right,
this,
and
like,
it's like, it's kind of fine, but also this is really stupid. Like,
I mean,
like
for all the artistic,
right.
it's like this person was dealing with this same thing in this. There is a point where it's like, okay, so what? What are you trying to say? Like, it's kind of like, the feather in Forrest Gump. It's like, I believe I just died, by the way. Just literally died in front of us. Like, I mean, it's something that, like, a really precocious fifth grader would think is the deepest thing ever. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay. Now, I think we would agree Northwoods as a work of literature is a really brilliant representation of this type of story.
But in this movie, you got, like, what's the guy that played the dad in the movie?
Paul Bettany.
Yeah, Paul Bettany. I was about to say Paul something. I can't remember. That Paul Bettany's like literally screaming the whole movie, by the way. But it's like, you can't leave because you've got to help us.
Let me just say I love the plot here. It says, the film is presented in a non-linear narrative. The following is a linear summary of the plot. Dinosaurs are shown roaming an area until they are wiped out and the Ice Age takes hold. That's the first. That's the first sentence. I'm sure some people compare this to Tree of Life, also the Terrence Malick movie, in terms of like.
Well, if I thought I kind of didn't like that movie,
in terms of like specifically this one family story over time being juxtaposed against the history of time, because I think we would all agree like the main crux of this movie is
the Tom Hanks
Robin Wright,
not
characters.
The lazy boy section of the movie,
or
the Benjamin Franklin section.
Some of the stuff you're like, why? How does this relate? And I think more than anything, like with David Fincher and Steven Soderbergh, that a lot of Zemeckis's like films over the last so many years have been more technical preoccupations than they've been actual narrative or stories.
Yeah,
and that this feels like, what if we did a movie where there was no official camera movement, the camera stays in the same place, and visually all the things change or go between. I think like that it was more of a technical exercise than anything else. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
As far as like, that's probably what motivated Zemeckis to make a movie like this.
Yeah. And
juxtaposed specifically, like, all of time ends up being the culmination, like it culminates in this boomer family, literally these boomer generation characters as the centerpiece of their own, of the history of time, has all led up to boomer like culture. Because I mean, I say this with a certain degree of love and fascination with boomer culture is they have always considered themselves the main characters of reality. Yeah. And I mean, Forrest Gump as a film is the ultimate text or expression of that. And this is like an epilogue or addendum to that perception of cultural supremacy. I don't know how else to say it. And that the whole Ben Franklin deal and the whole dinosaur deal and the lazy boy
and the pilot who died in World War One, whatever. That's the most random one to me. It's just like, what? Why is this in this?
Well, and again the
Native American stuff that happened,
and then all
it
all
sounds
the
like we're
time
making
was
this stuff up. We're not. It's it literally happened.
And all this being said, I still kind of like what it is. It's just in terms of the daring.
Well, let me put it this way. It's kind of like what I just said about The Brutalist a while ago. It's like it's trying these cheap ways to get me to feel something, these emotions. And then I do think a lot about the ending and the heartbreak of the moment of Robin Wright has Alzheimer's and she can't remember anything. And he sits her down and said, "We used to live here."
And then the camera movement happens, and you feel like there's the momentous moment happening in the movie because obviously the cameras had to have moved when they actually made the movie, but in terms of in the narrative of the film, that's the first time the camera moves and you see the other side of the kitchen, that has been deprived of us for the whole movie.
We kind of made a joke about that, but just of her, the wonder on her face and her saying, "I love it. I remember here. I love it here," is truly is and I know we're joking, but to be serious, that actually really did make me go wow, that actually is a pretty deep moment. Mm-hmm. Okay.
No.
Yeah,
but
I know, but it actually did really kind of get to me in the moment. I was like, "Oh, that actually is pretty impressive."
Sure.
The rest of it's all a pile of dinosaur crap. So
I don't know if I go that far, but it's just the fact that it's amazing to walk out of a movie and you shake your head like somebody really funded all that for a big-ish enough budget. It's just like, wow, okay.
No, but we did laugh every time that it said here. I nudged Kyle, but then I do feel like when it got to the end, I was didn't do it at that point.
Then the movie nudged you, is what you're saying.
Reach out and touch faith. Yeah. It
had also the very final ending moment
was
very
a lot like
suspicious
Presents.
to the ending of Presents.
Because I said that because I went and saw that movie. I saw it different than you did because I was feeling kind of sick at the time. And then I told you afterwards, I was like, wasn't that literally like the end of here? And you were like, I was literally thinking that.
Well, and also, it's also...
Because that movie's trapped in there the whole movie, in that house. The whole movie.
And it's also, indicative of the feather of Forrest Gump is literally also visually, what it's drawing a connection to.
Yeah.
I guess this is the first time... Will this be the first time Tom Hanks and Robin Wright have been in a movie together since then?
Probably.
I guess it would have been. Obviously, Zemeckis and Hanks have worked together several times.
Yeah.
Anyways,
probably would be.
But I do think imagine years from now when the career of Robert Zemeckis is all over and we're kind of looking back on the past tense, that I do feel like this is going to be a random capstone to a lot of things he's done.
All the sins that he's done.
The sins that you've done. Anyways, here, yeah.
All I'm saying is that ending did really kind of move me. And if that's all it took, then fine, whatever.
I wasn't trying to belittle what you were saying.
No, I know,
but
yeah.
The movie nudged you at the end, is what you're saying. No, it is one of those catharsis moments for sure.
Sometimes it's a real, True Detective Season 1 tagline. Sometimes you reach out and touch darkness, and darkness touches you back, kind of deal.
One other thread of the movie we didn't mention that we should mention before we move on.
The
whole it's set in 2020.
Yeah, I forgot
and
about that.
It's this black family. It's the most 2020 thing ever. It's this black family in the house who their cleaning woman gets COVID and dies, and then the dad's talking to his son about the conversation that you got, or the conversation about when cops pull you over, it's the most bottle time capsule.
Yeah.
This is what 2020 was racial unrest and COVID. It's just so eye roll worthy.
That woman's death is kind of treated as a joke.
Yeah, or just very quickly talked about, and you get it.
Yeah.
COVID, right? It's just So
it just felt like it was a joke, and I was kind of like, that's not good.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Anyway.
So, anyways, you want to roll your eyes, go watch here. So,
yeah.
All right, next up, this is a new category.
Or any Zemeckis movie other than Castaway and Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't take up for Back to the Future.
Well,
okay?
I know among the two of us, I have the controversial opinion that Back to the Future is actually a great movie. I know that's a crazy thing to say, but
yeah,
I know it's the how it is.
It's all right.
Yeah, that Back to the Future deal, it's kind of whatever.
I mean, it kind of is. So
I would agree, though, specifically the two that you like, Castaway and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, are both great.
Castaway is really pretty great. But
that's a movie that's sneakily great, I think, too. That it's great for superficial reasons, and I think it's also great for not superficial reasons. A movie
that it doesn't make a joke of it, but I will say in that movie, there's the other guy who was like the main chief cop on Justified, who's like his friend, whose wife dies.
Yeah, and
he's kind of, oh yeah, sorry about your wife, by the way, that she died.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I know that you went through hell, but like she literally died.
Do we? I don't want to dwell on this, but do we need to have any kind of status report on Tom Hanks's career at this moment in terms of what it is or like what it's going for? I don't even know what that means exactly. No. But I'm just saying, like,
other than the fact he's literally going to be, we're going to watch probably tonight that new nature documentary about the Americas or whatever, and he's doing that. So maybe, I don't know. Yeah, you might be on something there. I don't know.
I'm just wondering.
Well, let me say
there's
also,
certain actors that get a certain age that are. I would say the same thing about. I know this is going to be blasphemy to certain people. The other Tom of the '90s, Tom Cruise. I'm more and more scratch my head as years go by. Like, what's all these
what
years?
What is this whole Scientology thing you got going on?
That's a whole other conversation.
LRH. Like. No, one thing actually before we move on, I want to say to clarify about Castaway. I actually think that the point of that, what I mentioned, is to say, yeah, I guess everything wasn't as bad for me. I was alive, and I'm alive now, and that person isn't, and, and really I didn't have it as bad as I thought I did. I know that's what the point is, but the movie's almost like, oh, yeah, by the way, your wife died, I guess. Sorry. That wouldn't have been as exciting as me having a plane crash.
Have you ever seen Contact?
No.
That's the Zemeckis movie you should see. You could either love or hate that movie.
That's that movie that has that crazy shot in it of the girl running down the hallway and it's a mirror or whatever.
Yeah,
and it has Jodie Foster in it.
And McConaughey, yeah. He's like the co-lead, yeah.
Was he a scientist?
I really genuinely don't even know.
I was going to
say, probably is,
he'd
though.
Be like, we got to get these aliens.
We got to get on this planet with water. We got them waves.
Matthew McConaughey goes to space.
There's people. The people who ride for Contact ride. For
I know.
Contact.
I've heard. I know that. That's what I was gonna say. Is like people are crazy.
Then there's other people like, what the hell is this? Yeah. Whatever. just like.
Well, and then last thing about Castaway before we move on is that I showed that movie in my film club at school, and the kids really liked it overall. But like, you know how like the movie has like 30 minutes left after he comes
that,
back.
By the way.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
But like it keeps going on, and the kids were like, oh, okay, whatever.
Well,
he
made it off the
island,
right?
And so they're not even paying attention to like the great scene of him with that guy giving the monologue and all that, and all the stuff of him and his wife or the woman he was going to marry, like all that stuff.
Sorry,
that is not what that sound was either.
It was like taking the sounds and combining them or something. I don't know. Anyways, go on.
So anyway, yeah, just that. I just thought it was funny to sit there watching them not watch that section of the movie.
Right.
They were just like, oh, yeah, whatever, it's over. So it's like, it's actually kind of not. There's stuff going on. But
I've got the weird opinion, because I think the whole movie's great. So let me just say that. My favorite stuff is the very beginning and the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
All the stuff on the islands, of course, great. But I just think it's like specifically the after. That's like that's to me what the whole movie's really about, is how do you come out of an experience.
There's that great moment where he's left by himself. I know, random, we're talking about Castaway here, but there's that scene where he's like left by himself after a big party they had, and there's all this food, and he's standing there looking at the crab.
Yeah.
And there's parts in the movie earlier on where he'd eaten crab, and you can tell he's just like,
I've had enough of
Yeah,
that.
I've had enough. And it's like a great little moment, though, of him,
Yeah.
like, it's funny how we think about, it's like, it's honestly a moment of, like, somebody who's done without something,
Yes.
thinking about the way that other people think about that thing, or trying to think
right.
about it that way again. He's like, I can't do that. It's
Or
like,
that they
you know,
wouldn't have even necessarily thought about.
Right.
He's been eating crab for freaking
Right.
5 years
Yeah,
straight.
or
so you
whatever,
don't
or
need to-
coconuts or whatever, yeah. But also, yeah, I really love that one moment in the movie that always makes me laugh. Is when he's opening all the packages that wash up on the beach.
Yes.
There's like a bunch of different stuff in there. But the one that I literally do this massive belly laugh every time I see it. I don't even work at it because I don't forget it, but I know it's coming. And he opens it and there's just divorce papers in there. I always just bust out laughing. I'm like, it's just he's just looking at it. And sometimes I think, did he like read over that and find out about these people's dirty laundry or what? Like, you know,
Yeah.
it always makes me laugh.
Really subtle, brilliant, mature, actually also simple movie in its own ways. I think that's
Castaway, not here.
Castaway is for sure.
Not here.
Also, last thing,
Yeah.
one of the best teaser trailers of all time.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Check that out if you haven't seen it. All right, so that's Castaway. Excuse me, here because here's the eye roll. Of the year.
No, sorry. Yeah, quote of the year next is what.
Quote of the year. Next, again, we didn't have this last year. I don't know why, because this is a great category. Quote of the year, and I'm going to let Levi do the honors with this one.
And I'll explain it. This is from Conclave, a movie that is like probably the best movie in quotes
Yeah.
of the year, as far as being like a pop movie
Well,
that
that's
kind
what
of
I'm
made
saying.
money.
That
And
Challenger, like
Yeah.
I think, like in an ideal world, Challenger's also kind of ascended to that level. That,
Yeah.
but it did for a certain
Right.
point. But anyway,
And there's a lot of things
Conclave.
to love about Conclave.
based
but,
on a Thomas Harris novel.
Yeah,
who,
I
of course, did
particularly
Silence of the
loved
Lambs.
its political statements. I thought were very apt, especially after the election. But as far as the idea of like, what does Christianity actually mean? And it's like not a faith-based movie, but it's very much about faith, though. And I don't feel like it's doing it in like a... Because, I mean, it's obviously obsessed with the intrigue of the papal conclave as a concept, but, like, it also is about... It is a faith-based movie, though, as far as, like, what is this actually about, though? Mm-hmm. What is really the soul of the Catholic Church and the papacy? What's that supposed to be?
Yeah.
You know? And it answers that, I think, pretty well, and is a very great movie in that regard. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the greatest quote of, or line reading of the year. There's a scene with
John Lithgow.
John Lithgow and Ray Fiennes where
Ray Fiennes
John
is the
Lithgow says, "I'm going to pretend this conversation never took place."
And he walks away.
And he starts walking away, and
Yeah.
Ray Fiennes says, "But it has taken place."
Yeah.
And which was so shocking, I busted out laughing. I was literally like, what? Because we, by the way, saw this with your fiance and her sister, Lainey and Kaylee, and we all just started laughing. Like, what? And that's become this whole quote amongst us. Of
Well,
like,
also,
what,
too,
you know?
that whole idea of, well, we're just going to act like something didn't happen. And I love he's like, no,
Yeah.
this did
Yeah,
happen.
right.
We
He's like,
will
but
ad-
it did.
Yeah.
But he's almost like, not even in anger. It's like he's almost like panicking, like, no, but it did.
Yeah.
It did happen. Like, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pretend this conversation never took place. John Lithgow.
John Lithgow is sea captain, is what that sounds like.
John Lithgow is sea captain, matey. I'm going to pretend this boat can be piloted by me.
So Conclave, though,
Yeah, but really good movie
Yeah,
overall.
we had fun with that.
So, yeah, this conversation has taken place.
it is perfectly said by Ray
Yeah.
Fiennes in his
Right.
accent.
I tried to
voice.
find it on YouTube, and
Literally, the scene.
the scene stops right when he's about to say it. I was literally wanting to throw my phone, like, are you kidding me? You left out the best part.
But you're literally saying, but this conversation
Yeah, but that line has taken place.
Yeah.
Okay. Next
All
one is the Filet of Fish movie of the year.
Which is basically, are we going to just say worst movie of the year? Is what
Yeah,
this
basically, or
stands in for?
abomination of some sort.
Okay.
I'm going to let you go first,
My pick for this is Amelia Perez,
which I didn't see.
which is on Netflix. If you want to waste time, go watch it.
I'm good. I found other ways to waste time. It's called video games.
Because, you know, there's certain bad movies that I'm like, hey, but like, check
but it
this
has
out
taken place.
to believe it. Like,
Right.
I would genuinely say, don't even waste your time with this because it's just such a idiotic thing. the most idiotic thing of all is for how many Oscars and awards attention is taken up. I'm trying to let me just find a little synopsis of this to describe it, because
you tried to explain it to me 3 or 4 times, and each time it seems more elaborate, like as far as what it's actually about, and I'm very confused by it.
Well, it's based on an opera, so let that.
Well, there's your first problem.
Yeah, based on an opera.
I talked about this on our last Blowing Smoke about my thoughts about opera, so go look that up.
So I'm gonna do my best in this single sentence that Wikipedia has to try to sum up what Amelia Perez is about. Follows a Mexican cartel leader, played by Carla Sofia Gascon, who enlists a lawyer, Zoe Saldana, to help the cartel leader to disappear and transition into a woman. Now, if you think, I bet this movie has kind of a sense of humor about itself, and it's kind of a satire or a comedy. Not really. Now, there are some moments I can tell that they're intentionally going for more comedy, but this is honestly, I think, the biggest failure of the movie is that it's trying to take itself way too seriously as being a bad musical. And I'm someone who, I actually love a good musical. Like, I'm not somebody, I'm not a heterosexual man who just hates musicals on principles like other ones I know. I actually genuinely like a good musical if presented with one. This is not one, babe, okay? This is abomination. The fact that it's trying to take a Mexican cartel leader who genuinely is presented as a pretty horrific person, who has had people killed, people assassinated, dealt drugs, destroyed people and communities, and then basically make the argument that, but when they became they transitioned into being a woman, they're now honestly, they're good and they want to help out people. And actually the whole time they were doing all those awful things to other people, they're actually had this trauma that they were dealing with, and so just overlook all that awful stuff they did, because actually it was traumatic the whole time. And now that they're a woman, this is a woman who's going to transform and change everything for the better. There's this whole subplot about how Selena Gomez is in the movie as the wife of the cartel leader, who is then with her children told, actually, Zoe Saldana kind of makes sure that they're hidden away. Actually, your husband was killed and murdered, and so you've got to start over. And so, like, in the past, Selena Gomez had a romantic entanglement with a character played by, who was Edgar Ramirez. And so now she's trying to pursue a relationship with Edgar Ramirez, once she believes that her husband, who's now a woman and who's this big philanthropist basically, is dead. And then I don't even. This movie's sense of morality and ethics is one of the greatest abominations I've seen in movies in forever.
It really sounds like it is.
It's just a minefield of garbage. And the fact that this movie got all this Academy Awards attention, which is kind of, I don't know if you've been following this much, has basically started to be sunk in recent weeks, mostly because...
Yeah, something happened with that main
Carla
actress,
Sofia
right?
Gascon, the actress who is indeed trans in real life, all these, tweets have been resurfaced that she had tweeted in the past, that some of which I think were pro-Hitler or pro-Nazi tweets. And it really expressed a lot of...
I didn't know what it was that she had done.
A lot of really awful, disrespectful things that she had tweeted have since kind of actually ruined the movie's Oscar chances, and this started to come out. I think Zoe Saldana still has a shot to win Best Supporting Actress, apparently. But really dumb, everything that's been going on with this. So let me just read. This is what it says here on the Wikipedia page. Following her nomination for Amelia Perez, a series of posts made by Gascon between 2019 and 2021 resurfaced. They are identified as containing bigoted speech against a wide variety of communities, including one calling Islam a, quote, hotbed of infection for humanity, one with Catalanophobic content, and one wondering if
Catalonia people, okay.
And wondered if the Oscars had become a, quote, Afro-Korean festival,
what?
A Black Lives Matter demonstration, or International Women's Day. She deleted and apologized, then deactivated her account. So this has since been, resurfaced and talked about with all this stuff in the lead up. So it's kind of sunk the movie's chances. What's your own perception of what Amelia Perez is from the outside looking in as someone who's not seen it?
A bunch of nonsensical word salad. That is the sort of thing that, as a liberal progressive person, people of the right would point to as evidence that, see, all this PC crap is nonsense, and it's like, it just, and obviously it's not, but this is the type of thing that sets that kind of thing back. But the good news is it seems like nobody's paying attention to it on that side of the political aisle, so it kind of doesn't really mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
But
and I just like the stupidity of, and then simplicity of, now that they're trans, and they've transitioned into being a woman, like, all those sins are forgiven. It's just a very idiotic movie in so many ways. Well,
you remember what James Baldwin said about the African American experience once. He said, as far as speaking in terms of minorities, I guess, he said something like, we are also liars, murderers, dictators, all these things, and we are people too. Mm-hmm. So then went on to talk about, obviously, how America's racist and all these things was true. But, as institutionally, I mean. And so that is the same thing here. It's like, just because you transition doesn't mean you're a saint. I mean, same thing with anything, right? Yeah. So that's just a total fallacy that's stupid. That I think most people would agree is dumb. So I don't really.
So anyways, this movie got something like 14 Oscar nominations. It was just like this crazy, that tied it with all these massive great movies in history, that you have gotten Oscar nominations before. So just incredibly baffling, to say the least. But anyways, Amelia Perez, do not watch it. Don't waste your time.
Okay.
Part of me does want you to see it just so you could try to experience what it is for yourself, but honestly, don't bother.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yours is, wait a minute, hold on, let me get our sound.
And we talked a lot about
here.
this one already, and I have literally nothing really to say about it, but we're going to go ahead and do it.
And your loser is
Joker Filet-O-Dew, which is partly why I asked that we call this the Filet of Fish. By the way, no offense to the Filet of Fish, but it always sounded bad. So.
Yeah.
What an awful movie, Joker Filet-O-Dew. You know what's funny about it is it's so forgettable, so bad that it kind of doesn't even matter. It's just like, oh yeah, that was bad.
Because the first movie we didn't like.
No.
But was kind of a societally actually important-ish movie that came out for what it represents and what it meant, and that did not apply to this second one. So.
Yeah, I mean, it just was bad in pretty much every way, and didn't really mean anything. Because, the best thing about this movie is that when we got home from it, our power was back on from Helene.
Oh, that was when that was. So there you go.
Other than that, I mean... Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Good. I mean, I don't really know what to say about it other than that. It's just, it was the type of movie that was actually an unremarkably bad movie, which is kind of the worst kind of movie that you could make.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
But we're not people who like dwelling on the bad,
no.
Stuff. So we're not even going to talk too much about that. No. So that is that, which, no thank you. Now let's get to these are the 3 heavy hitter categories, Levi. So this is big time stuff. I don't know why we didn't have this last year, but this is a new edition. Best performance of the year goes to
Mikey Madison in Nora, which we didn't get the chance to talk about, and is a movie that has received some minor form of controversy surrounding its sexuality and just it as a movie in general. First of all, how do you respond to that in particular, or the movie maybe in general?
Well, in particular, there's some backlash that's happened by the fact that this movie didn't have intimacy coordinators, which has been a new thing in movies, specifically with sex scenes. Mikey Madison has been nothing, I don't think, but complimentary about what the whole process of making this movie was. And Sean Baker obviously has, a history of making movies about
sex workers
and marginalized people, sometimes within sex work. And so, I don't think that's, and we're still living through a new era in terms of this being a more common thing anyway. So, I thought this movie was terrific. It's definitely, I'd say, probably in the top 5 of the year. And I know that Sean Baker has a chance to win Best Director apparently pretty seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's been actually working a pretty long time, too.
Yeah, he's been working longer than you think. I know because, obviously, his first movie that really broke through was Tangerine.
Yeah.
And then, Florida Project, Red Rocket, which I still want to see. Actually, got a
Well, he had made movies even before
now.
Tangerine, like Take Out, and there was that one other movie, I can't remember the name of it. It just got a Criterion release soon.
He's randomly one of the filmmakers most associated with Letterboxd, as far as being pretty active on Letterboxd.
Yeah, I follow him on there.
It.
Matter of fact, he's got something. Let's see what his newest movie is that he did. Hang on, I'll have to check it. But anyway, yeah.
Mikey Madison, obviously, she's, kind of... She's been in some things the last few years.
His latest movie was Eastern Condors.
Okay. She had kind of a small but prominent role at the very end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I said America, but Hollywood. And so she's been in a few things the last few years. I think she was in one of the more recent Scream movies. But this was definitely kind of a breakthrough performance for her. She's only 25. She'll be 26 in March. So she's kind of one of the big young actresses in Hollywood. And this is a type of role that is just a great showcase for her. She gets to be funny. She gets to be serious. She gets to cry. She gets to laugh. I mean, it's kind of the perfect performance of somebody that I think somebody of her skill set uses to near perfection, I feel like. And I know it's apparently between her and Demi Moore who's going to win Best Actress this year. So we'll see who. And I think they're both could have a argument to win in their own ways. I think, though, that Mikey Madison would personally be my own pick to win because I think she just embodies everything that character is and represents, and also is a manifestation of we've got the potential for a great new star on our hands.
Yeah.
So what about Mikey Madison stands out for you? And
I'll say I've liked the little bit of stuff I've seen from Sean Baker. I'd only seen the Florida Project before this, and then I know a lot about some of his other movies like Red Rocket or even Tangerine. This got compared a lot to the Safdies, especially Uncut Gems. What I like about this, though, it has a little bit of a different sensibility in terms of willingness to make longer scenes, to let the actors do a lot of the work. Mm-hmm. And not the actors don't always do a lot of work, but it doesn't focus on these big set pieces so much as just actors doing what they, acting and doing what they need to do. And she's just really great in this and very effortlessly great. And I feel like she modulates very well between joy and anger and sadness. I actually really like her in the last section of the movie, which a lot of people are going to say she's probably not as good in because she's just being quiet and watching things happen. But I think it's her silence in those sections of just kind of sitting and watching other people's decisions and her judging them is really impressive to me.
Yeah.
And so I want to say about that, as far as that goes, I think she's actually very successful in that part of the movie where a lot of people would not say that.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Also, you're hovering over his name there. What's that guy's name? Just to speak about him for a second.
Karen Karagulian as Toros.
One of my favorite characters in any movie ever. Literally, the moment when he is basically... well, he's not introduced exactly in that scene, but when it
feels
really
like
kind
a Safdie brothers or Coen brothers character.
When he really takes over the movie, basically, he's like in the middle of a baptism for a baby in like a Orthodox church, and they're like Albanian, I think.
So, yeah.
And he
says Armenian.
Or Armenian, I'm sorry, I apologize. Armenian, I think, that's what it was. I knew there might be some Albanian characters in that movie, though I can't remember. But anyway, and he looks at his phone, and it's about this whole situation that's going on with the Russian mob boss's son, who is married to Mikey Madison in the movie, and he looks at it and literally goes, "Oh no," like out loud in front of all these people, and then literally has to give the baby over and says, "Sorry, I have to go and deal with this problem." And it's like in the middle of all this, like just one of the funniest random things ever. Is just like, wow. So yeah, a really good movie. Really loved. I actually also really loved the
Palme d'Or at Cannes, I believe, right?
And I also want to say something a little bit here about what's that guy's name? Who's like the other guy in the movie?
The Igor guy.
Yeah.
His name is Yura Borisov.
I think he's also really great.
I would agree.
And he's very quiet the whole time, and the whole movie you realize is kind of sort of the love story between him and Honora in a way.
Yeah.
And kind of over time that developing in a very silent way, sort of, and a lot of people put criticisms towards that. I'm just kind of like, I don't know, go screw yourself. Like, I don't know what else to say to you other than that. So, yeah, I don't know. It works. And
Honora, it works.
I don't know. It's just really good.
On the poster.
So,
no, I agree. It's a great movie that is rightfully so among the celebrated as among the best of the year. So the
2 awards left.
2 awards left. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here. This next category, Levi and I split kind of our answers with, and I think we would agree that these are kind of our personal number one favorite movies of the year that are represented between these. But Filmmaker of the Year, Levi, I'll let you go first. Levi's Filmmaker of the Year is... Let's open that envelope first. Who could it be now?
Alex Garland, who of course directed Civil War.
Mm-hmm. Been around in Hollywood for quite a while.
Yeah.
A lot of different projects that
he's
known
done
for.
so many things, actually, and I've only really seen so many of them. But I made it clear throughout this year how much I truly love Civil War. I think is, like I said, I think personally is the best movie that has been made in the United States since the pandemic. And Garland is the type of person I just really like his sensibility of outlook on things, which is obviously very negative most of the time. But I really loved Annihilation. I thought was really great. I quite liked Ex Machina, but that was kind of the first major thing I'd seen that he had done. Didn't really care for Men, but also was able to just shrug and say whatever, you know.
That's the thing is, he's been pretty prolific in both as a screenwriter and a director, so he's made so many things that you can kind of shrug off the things you don't quite like, and I didn't like Men either, but yeah.
And of course, part of my awarding of him this is also has to do with him putting out Warfare coming up this year, which is co-directed by he and the choreographer for Civil War, Ray Mendoza. Who's done a lot of stunts for movies and stuff, and I'm pretty sure was in the Iraq War. Mm-hmm. He was in SEAL Team 5. And this movie's kind of about the Iraq War, and I know it's gotten a lot of like bad responses and buzz towards it, like, oh, who cares about that? And people said this ain't really all that accurate, and I'm kind of like, literally a guy who was there was making the movie. Yeah. So like, not that makes it immediately accurate, but it's kind of like, well, he's the veteran. He can make whatever he wants to make.
It's one of those movies, however good or bad it is going to be a lightning rod when it comes out. Weirdly, more so than Civil War was. I was shocked by how much Civil War was not turned into a political object as much.
Because it made itself not that.
I would agree.
Successfully, yeah. But that was not what a lot of people thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was what was so weird. People were talking about it leading up to it.
Yeah.
And then the movie came out and people were like, oh, I can't really co-opt this either way, even though I mostly think it's a pretty liberal film, pretty decidedly so. But that's not something that either side could lambast either, though, because it was like, that's not really talking about anything.
Well, I think the most surprising thing about Civil War, a movie that I also actually loved, I'm a little more cautious about I mean, I'll talk about why later, but I think as a film, it's brilliant. It's actually a movie about the nature of journalism, which is not at all, I don't think, what people have thought it was going to be about. You know, like you said,
which is inherently a liberal story.
Yes, I would agree.
So that in that way, it is very liberal, but it doesn't make it about the politics of the moment. It makes it about what happens to a person who covers violence
and their desensitized nature to it, and also the nature of like what is the responsibility of journalism in times of violence and in times of war. Again, it was a movie that like really didn't care about like left versus right as in as many traditional ways that we thought that it would, because one of the things people joked about the movie was that, you know, in this reality, this dystopian future of America, that California and Texas were allied together, and those of course are two, one's incredibly conservative, one's incredibly liberal state. And so, but it was not like, again, it was more about like, again, I think as you said, ultimately the movie is liberal in the sense of it's like about the nature of authoritarianism and how authoritarianism can have an influence in journalism and in media, and how the movie's trying to say, well, actually, we're going to try to show things as they are. Which is an inherently liberal act. I don't care what anybody says. As people could say, that's not true. That's a bias show, and it's not. I just know it's not. So you can just say whatever you want, but it's not. And so in that way, the movie does have like a liberal mindset and mentality. But again, it's not about politics in that traditional way. It's about the nature of journalism, and also like it's, I think the most brilliant thing about the movie in many ways is that it is a commentary on war movies. It's a commentary on war journalism, war photography, war videos, and how naturally we know as human beings that these are horrific things that we shouldn't want to watch, but we do. We want to see a movie about a civil war. We want to see these violent acts. And so the movie is in of itself about why do you care so much, or why do you want to see these things? And the movie's kind of very directly pointing
and almost creates
a mirror at the and a gun, a mirror and a gun at you all at the same time.
And it's also creating a world in which that's the only truth that's left, is to actually see what it is.
Right.
And it's kind of like, well, here's the scenario you really want. Do you like it? And it's kind of like, well, no, I
think the most enduring scene of the whole movie is the one that was used in the trailers with Jesse Plemons talking about like what kind of American are you, and that like that idea, and I think that's the most obvious stab towards the politics of the current moment is this questioning of, no, you're not my type of American, so you're the enemy, and that the delineation between those things. The reason I said I'm a little cautious about this movie and why it's personally not exactly my number one favorite of the year, even though I think it is a 5-star movie. I think it is definitely one of the best movies of the year. And I've been frankly a little down on the fact that I've not seen it on as many best of lists here and there. I don't feel like it was as well represented as it should have been. To me, it's just too close to the present moment in a lot of ways. In the same way, I feel like Green Room also was a version of this back in 2015. Was that come out 2015? 2016. That like it was such an ugly but necessary representation of the moment that I almost, especially also what happened in the middle of the year with the summer of 2024 and what the attempted assassination on Trump and the whole fallout of that. I mean, I did see the movie creep up into some conversations immediately after that.
Well, and we similarly as Green Room was when the Charlottesville stuff happened in 2017.
Yeah.
That
it's a movie that honestly is on the pulse of what we need to be talking about, but I'm honestly at such a raw place about a lot of this stuff that I feel like I want to wait a little while before I rewatch Civil War, and that is by no fault of the filmmaking. That has more to do with the temperature and climate of the present moment. That I'm just like, you know what, I don't even want to read. But I think the movie, and also not enough is talked about the actual filmmaking of Civil War, because I think it's like the sound design of the movie is incredibly accomplished and incredibly visceral. And not in a way of like a fake war movie way. It feels like it's something that literally your ears are almost going deaf by some of the sound design of the movie. So I think this is a great movie, but it's also one that it's hard for me to feel great about recommending or like thinking of as a great movie for this year. Not because it's not, but because like by virtue of what it is, it draws up a lot of ugliness of the present. That again, and I don't think really should take away from the movie itself, but is just me personally. I'm kind of at a raw place about a lot of the things that it's in a roundabout way talking about in this present. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I know you're not quite as
No, I don't.
guarded about it in that way because obviously you're celebrating it as the film of the year, and I think in some ways it is the film of the year in terms of what it's about and what it's saying. But
Yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, and I don't want to get into too much of the political conversation about the last, month. But
2-3 months now too. But yeah, but specifically since Trump's been re-inaugurated, I know you're meaning.
Well, that's what I mean.
The election and
what he's
aftermath
actually
and,
doing, not
right.
what was said to happen.
Yeah.
Is the very sick and sad reality is that that something like that's just not going to happen anyway. So because everybody's just going to ignore everything, and we're going to get to a place that we'll eventually be able to get back out of, but it's going to take time.
Yeah.
But I think everybody's just so exhausted by it.
I guess that's more. That's what it is. It's a sense of exhaustion and like, futility.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying that you're wrong in feeling that way, but my feeling is looking at that more as science fiction because it's like, that's not really going to happen.
And also,
so
I mean, at that point,
but
the world of the movie does feel like an alternate reality of what the reality exactly we're in now.
to the point where it's not even being specific about what actually has happened to get us there either.
Right. That's fair.
Because that's not what the movie's about. And it's using... I think it's also smart to use the imagery of itself to say, well, now it's in America, so how do you like it now? That's also, the whole point, I think, is to say, even from a British point of view, coming from Garland, who's British, to take America and say, well, now here, how do you like that? Because you see it in Africa or the Middle East or wherever all the time, so now here's your version of this, and it's just as violent here as it is there, So, also, like, all I'm saying about warfare is that if it's basically the action sequences in Civil War for a whole movie, then to be the bro in the room for the moment, hell yeah, let's go,
Yeah,
so,
I mean, all the action sequences are incredibly well done.
So we'll see, and I'm sure that'll even have less of a political aspect to it than this did. I mean, as far as what it is, it's very much going to be about this is what the experience of being in a war was like, rather than politics,
I think it's great to see him transition from being purely this well-known screenwriter into being a really, I think, great
and also he's coming out. They're coming out with 28 Years Later this year, which he wrote. So all this is kind of connected to these 2 years of like, he's kind of having sort of a quote comeback of sorts, or that is so people care so little about in its own way that makes it even better. That he's like, well, whatever, I'm just still going to do what I'm going to do, and I respect that. So cool.
Yeah. So I agree. I think Civil War is a great movie, and Alex Garland is a great director in that way. My selection for the Filmmaker of the Year goes to Jane Schoenbrunn, who, of course, in 2024 directed I Saw the TV Glow. And also, we watched for the first time, and this is also kind of semi-connected to this, We're All Going to the World's Fair. We talked about both of these movies back when we had I Saw the TV Glow, which was, I think, in the summer. That is, personally, for me, my favorite movie of the year is I Saw the TV Glow. It's something I've not got out of my head ever since I've seen it. I've just been constantly thinking about it. And
like the Pico Pig? You remember the Pico Pig? No, we talked about this movie when it came out.
Yeah, so I don't want to belabor the point too much. But, to me, like, when I look back on, like, already some of my favorite movies of 2020, the 2020s, this and Beau is Afraid are, like, my 1 and 2. Or Beau is Afraid and then this is 1 and 2. Movies that are really, I feel like, obsessed with not trying to capture, like... Well, I think Beau is Afraid does kind of capture something that's a little bigger about society or culture. Obviously, I Saw the TV Glow's going a little bit more on an insular level about And something that really speaks to me about them in general as a filmmaker is as a millennial filmmaker, which I talked about back when I saw the movie, but like some of the reference points and cultural markers, and I know they are a elder millennial compared to me. I'm a little younger, but just someone who has like, as far as those two movies connection, let me just say first, Bo's afraid this, that they feel very insular, and they feel like they're talking about how we as individuals lost in a sea of subconscious signals of our society or culture, how we or people try to put themselves as the center of their own stories, whether they deserve it or not, and become the main characters of their own lives, whether they deserve it or not. And you know,
Jenny Berlin once said, "We're not all the." Oh, sorry, that's to Robert Kennedy. We're not all the supporting characters in the story. It is your life. You know.
Yeah, no, that's good.
It's more of a Robert Kennedy, I know. But.
And just real quick as a reminder, this is about two troubled high school students whose connection
troubled indeed
to their favorite television show drives them to question their reality and identities. It's a movie that I find above all else to be extremely sad in terms of one's sense of their own queerness and their own identities, and the fact that it's about characters who are feeling so restrained by their outer realities that they can only find significance to themselves in this fictional piece of entertainment that is even more unreal of us watching the movie. And I know there's going to be a lot of queer and trans, especially young people and even older people, because there's a subplot of that I think's under talked about, who see this movie and are going to find great significance to it. And you know, again, I talked about at the time, it's a story that, like, because I feel like a lot of queer trans stories are about getting over the hump and truly becoming who you are, and it's like there's a certain sameness to a lot of those stories.
Yeah. And
this is about, like, no, what if you don't do that, though? What if you actually are not going to act on who you are as a person, and you being in prison for that for decades?
Because I think it's important to note that even beyond the trans allegory, which it clearly is, that it's also just viewing the regular world as a prison. And the idea of, I'm really just a person that's in this great TV show with all this supernatural elements, and really I'm just trapped in the real world, and it's this prison. And it's like, no, that's actually what life is, like, you know. And even that, as that allegory of really being trapped in a different body, or the feeling of that for trans people. So, anyway. Yeah,
no, that's very true. Yeah. And like, it's kind of funny, but it's also is deeply sad and horrifying in its own way. Like when the I want to get the characters' names right here. The Owen character, as they're older, is watching the Pinko Pink like on streaming and realizing this is actually way dumber than I remember it being. And I placed all this significance and sense of identity in this thing that's so stupid. I feel like, obviously as media obsessed people ourselves who find, we obviously are able to separate ourselves from media, but we certainly, we're people who base our part of our own personalities on what types of things we like and we find significance in. I'm sure you and I we've not exactly talked about this, have both went back and watched things that we thought were these great things, and you just find to be utterly pathetic and without meaning, and you're just like, I put any significance in that, into this.
Yeah.
And again,
everybody's saying, by the way, from that, and it's like, yeah, you heard me right. Richard Donner's 1985 film, The Goonies. Not as great as you say. Goonies is not great. Yeah.
I'm not a queer person, and I think this movie is primarily a queer movie in terms of what it's about. But it's also the beauty of the movie is that it speaks to these other universal qualities that I think anyone who watches the movie can still find significance in terms of, especially of a certain age, generationally.
Yeah.
I just find it to be a deeply sad, heartbreaking movie that is so well done, and a confirmation of, I think, Schoenbrunn as one of our great young directors who, again, we also saw We're All Going to the World's Fair, and I really loved that as well. And that's kind of about a similar thing, except weirdly, it's more a little bit about internet culture.
Yeah.
And I would say this is more about like VHS 90s, Nick at Night, kind of that stream of, and also Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You have any other thoughts on Schoenbrunn? I know.
No, I'm not as big of a fan of them as you are, but I'm quite impressed by their just a bit. I'm glad that finally we found somebody of this era, because I've been waiting on it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The voice of the generation, because it feels like all our great directors are making all the movies that are about the past. And this movie's about the past, but it's like about recent.
But it's also
ideas.
about how we look back on the past in a modern way.
Like, all our great directors, be it Tarantino or Paul Thomas Anderson or Scorsese or whoever, are always making movies that are about the past. And it's kind of like, can we not have somebody that's making movies about now?
And I think
Trey Edward Schultz is kind of a version of that with Waves.
I thought Jordan Peele's slightly a little older also than Schoenbrunn would be, and is kind of on a similar-ish wavelength.
He's not really making. He's making social films, but in a more like typical way, though. I guess what I mean is I've been waiting on somebody who's like really a voice of the era they are in, and making movies about the 2020s, and like and so finally there's someone who has done that. So
sure, absolutely.
But yeah,
I was just looking. Peele is he's born in 79, so he's like either like on the very cusp of elder millennial / younger Gen X is kind of where that would be. But anyways, so those, we split Filmmaker of the Year between those two, but me and Levi agreed on what we're going to name the Film of the Year.
Kind of like what we did last year, or last time.
So the Film of the Year from Overlapping Dialogue in our second annual Harry Dean Stanton Awards goes to
The Bike Riders by Jeff Nichols.
So this was a movie that was supposed to come out in 2023.
Yeah.
And I know it got reshuffled for whatever reason, and it finally came out.
When it got sold. That was kind of because of the Disney buying Fox, because it was going to be under 20th Century Fox. It ultimately got sold to, was it
Focus?
Features, that's what I was going to say. I can't remember. And so, the movie kind of sat on a shelf for a little bit. I mean, literally, it should be no surprise, and we talked about this movie on the podcast, back when it came out, and I wrote about it, and we talked about it then, but, I mean, it's literally our kind of movie, and I've seen it 3 times now. I watched it with Mom and Dad.
Twice, I think, yeah.
We went and saw it the first time, then saw it with Dad again, and then I saw it with Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
And Mom really liked it, too. That was when you were going to London. Mm-hmm. We watched it on Christmas Day, actually. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of everything we love about movies as a movie, as far as being and finally being a great biker movie. We talked about that at the time, where it's kind of like, there's, if you go back and really watch biker movies, like we just recently watched The Wild Angels, which you'd already seen, which is a good movie, but I don't know, kind of I was like, it's fine.
And here's the problem, like, that's basically the best one.
Yeah.
And it's only that good.
Right.
And I say that as someone who actually likes it, but like, and so I think this represented the Goodfellas for the biker movie in terms of how, looking back on the gangster movies. But the thing is, the gangster movies also had a richer tradition.
Right.
I mean, within the span of a year, you basically got, a year or two, you got, back in the day, The Public Enemy, Little Caesar, which is flawed, but got an iconic performance, and Scarface back in the day. So, like, and then even a little later, you got Roaring Twenties and White Heat. So, like, the classic gangster movie already had like movies that are better than the biker movie eventually becomes in the 60s and kind of later, or even go back to the 50s a little bit with the Brando one. And this is like the Goodfellas of that class, where it's like, all right, after the fact, years later, let's kind of do the ultimate rise and fall crank version of what this is. And obviously this is not quite as good as Goodfellas, but in terms of capturing the vibe, of capturing the time and place and a scene and a group of people and the personalities of those people, and like the camaraderie of it, but also that there's always violence right around the corner of it. This just kind of is the ultimate embodiment of that in its own way. Great cast. I feel like now, weirdly, Tom Hardy's entered a phase where he's kind of an underrated actor, and I thought he was, of course...
Yeah, the last couple years, he's been turning out some really great performances that nobody's really talking about, and it's kind of like,
Austin Butler, of course, he's kind of almost like, he's sold as the lead, but really it's Jodie Comer is the real lead of the movie, and she's got a brilliant and great accent in that, and, I don't know, it's just, it was the movie, again, Levi and I had, I think... different favorite movies, which we just represented with Civil War and I Saw the TV Globe, but this just felt like a movie that was a great embodiment of things that we both love, and I think too that talking about movies that got the shaft with like award season time / best of the year time, people were ranking them. This just has been nowhere. This has not been, I've really seen recognized anywhere as like one of the standout movies of 2024. Why do you think that is? Is it just the release date when it came out and people forget about it?
I think it's that, and
it doesn't have a clear awards narrative also like other movies do.
I think it was a movie that lost steam for a lot of people when it was going to come out, and then it didn't, and I don't know. It just seems very weird because it's, I don't honestly know what the answer to that is, because it should be... all the answers I'm coming up with don't mean jack-esque, frankly, to why it's been forgotten about. I just don't really know. I don't get it. But
we loved it, and definitely recommend everybody checking it out and seeing it whenever you get a chance. Again, this is probably going to be one of those movies people look back on as far as all the actors that have been in it and go, wow, look at this cast. Look at all these people that have been in this. Yeah. And
look around. Look at all these people. This was said in Joker, Filet of Fish. Yeah.
So that's 2024. That's a wrap on 2024, which I think we would agree. It's been a pretty great year in movies. As we said at the beginning, there's no real rhyme or reason for that. It's just when things come out.
Where are we at timage-wise, by the way? I'm just curious.
We are at about 3 hours and 18 minutes.
Right that sounds about right. So we are about to make that brutalist
runtime, yeah. The real question is, like, how long will the Academy Awards ceremony be, and will it be longer than what this podcast has been? Probably.
Will it be better? No.
My boy Conan is hosting this year, so I do expect him to be good at that. Looking ahead at 2025, I've already seen what I know is going to be one of my favorite movies of the year, Presence, the newest Steven Soderbergh movie. I cannot believe that I'm saying that out loud, that one of the best movies of the year is going to be a Steven Soderbergh movie. It's been a while since we've been able to say that.
Yeah, I know.
Utterly loved it. Gave it 5 stars. To call it a horror movie is a little bit of... Wouldn't you agree it's a little bit of almost a misnomer, because it's not exactly a horror movie in the traditional way anyways, you know?
Right.
I mean, it's horror adjacent, definitely. I mean, it's a horror movie a little more explicitly than, say, something like a Ghost Story is, but it's also, I think that would be a good double feature, actually. So, that I'd say that's going to be one of the best movies of the year.
Yeah, and then also The Monkey, which we just saw this week. Really love that. Really a horror comedy in a true way for once.
Yeah.
Of actually being really funny, but also holy crap, the things that happen in that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just been a really... so far it's been a good year. And some movies that are coming up, just to mention, In the Lost Lands was that one movie I was talking about. Obviously not going to be good, but we'll run through some real quick. There's some that are coming out. I just want to say On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, which is a movie from, I believe, Zambia, that showed at Cannes this last year, and I heard good things about. A24's putting out.
Yeah.
Novocaine looks kind of fun.
Yeah.
Black Bag, that's going to be another Soderbergh movie. That probably won't be as great, obviously, but there's that. Did you hear about that Flying Lotus movie? Ash?
Yeah.
Looks kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I'm running through a list here. what's the name of that one movie that when Warfare coming out in April?
Yeah.
What's the name of that one movie that's the new Ryan Coogler movie?
Oh,
I can't
Sinners.
remember the name of it.
I think
yeah,
it's Sinners was the name.
I don't
of
remember
it.
when that's coming out. Oh, Friendship, that movie.
Oh, right.
Yeah, with Tim Robinson, Paul Rudd.
Yeah, Sinners comes out in April.
Okay, well, I passed by it. I guess I didn't see it.
Yeah.
I'm looking. F1 will at least probably be a fun little movie. 28 years later, possibility of being something. The trailer for that's really interesting. The new Superman movie's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
It's
also a Fantastic Four.
And the big one, of course, for us is One Battle After Another, the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Which was rumored to maybe be moved to next year, but that's not been totally confirmed yet. I know it's already test screened some places, so I've got a feeling it will still come out this year, but we'll see.
If anything, it'll just be later, I bet. The new Derek Cianfrance movie, Roof Man. So, hey, you know.
He didn't get to make Wolfman, but he's doing Roof Man.
Osgood Perkins is coming out with another movie called Keeper.
Yeah.
So that'll be something to look at. After the Hunt, we mentioned earlier, Luca Guadagnino film. The Running Man, that'll at least be a new Edgar Wright movie, something to see. That new Yorgos Lanthimos movie, Begonia, which is a remake of Save the Green Planet, that South Korean movie.
Yeah.
The new Avatar in December as well. So yeah, a lot of, and then other things that'll happen.
Well, also, I don't know if the new Jordan Peele movie is supposed to come out later this year. I don't know if it's been dated yet.
Yeah, I haven't heard about when that'll be. And then Marty Supreme, that Josh Safdie movie, is supposed to come out with Timothy Chalamet, Gwyneth Paltrow, Tyler the Creator. That's coming out. It's supposed to be Christmas, but we'll see. And a new Anaconda film, it looks like.
But I think this movie year is gonna, I think, is already off to a promising start, just barely into the year so far, and we'll be sure to cover it when we get there. When we get to the end of it. So this is a second annual Harry Dean Stanton Awards. We'll be sure to have all those in the mail soon for all the winners and losers. Whichever you.
I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did.
It was great.
Sorry if we kind of seem like we've run out of steam here at the end, but it's been literally a marathon this whole time going through these. So, it was a great year, and it was good to be back doing overlapping dialogue.
Absolutely.
But keep your ears tuned over to Blowing Smoke.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because that's where we're going to be. But there will probably be a little bit of a break, I'm guessing, probably after the first season due to a wedding that someone's having.
Yeah.
Who's that? You know who that
me,
is?
I guess.
Oh.
Yeah, getting married.
Am I doing something at that? I can't remember.
You're the best man, apparently.
Well, why ain't she marrying me?
I don't know.
As Jerry Seinfeld once said.
But it's been great to be back on here, and I guess I was going to say we'll hear from y'all soon, but
you'll
hear from us.
Don't
eventually.
call us; we'll call you, as they say.
This is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless.
Thank you for taking a Delta. Thank you very much. So nice. Goodbye.